Greetings, comrades. I'm making this episode because Ozzy died. No, not kidding. I used to make episodes about, explaining culture and history of the USSR. And this is one of those, because people asked me to make one. Didn't expect it to be this one. But here we are. This is the last thing I have unfinished from my dad. Dad was a musician, born in 1957 in a small town called Luban. And, he ended up playing bass in our National Opera Orchestra for 20 years while being in a punk rock band. And did some really weird stuff. And the last time we met in person, we had done something similar, like some of these stories, but from an episode that was like long lost. I think it was like one of the first ones, because we lost a bunch of data too. And we rewrote this and added a bunch of stuff, and I just stood there for a while because I had other stuff to do. And just before, he went to the hospital when I met him the last time ever, I just asked him, hey, do I record this alone? Will you going to sit next to me? How are we going to do this? And when should I publish this? And one of the last words before saying goodbye was like, oh yeah, publish it when Ozzy dies. Because it's like a joke, because Ozzy lives on forever. And fuck, the motherfucker died. Like Prince of Darkness. For a Prince of Darkness, he was a really nice person as well. And funny, because I bet he had probably no idea how much he actually meant to everyone here. So I'll be talking about the weirdest stuff that I have here in front of me from my notes from the life of a Soviet musician and all this mess. Some stuff about modern days as well. But before we get to that, let me warn you that if this is somewhat incoherent, then know that I pulled out my Gonzo stash. Because after all, I have had 2 beers, a glass of moonshine, bit of uppers, bit of psychedelics on all this stuff, and I made additional notes while listening to my favorite song of Black Sabbath, which is War Pigs. And I was doing all this stuff because really hard to focus and go back to this mood of making you understand the whole feeling. In the last year, if you have probably noticed, if you just listened to me since the start of the war, I tried to, become more sanitized. I thought that if I would be more like the Western media, and cleaner and such, then maybe, they'll listen or something. Because my goal is, I want to try to explain to them that they shouldn't be using sources and evaluating them just because, they have an English translation. And that probably they should sort of realize that this is a war going on and that normalcy does not apply here. But as they don't listen anyways, and I've lost a bunch of you guys because I became boring, which is just horrible, then I understood that, wait a minute. They call me unprofessional and they don't like the term Gonzo because, it's less about drugs. It's actually not about it. Drugs were just experiences at the time. I'm just overworked, really, so I have some uppers and I eat some weed before sleeping, but it's more about being real and experiences and all this stuff. You can't write about dog show in a Gonzo way. I mean, you can, but that's the part of Hunter S. Thompson's life where he just skipped the main event and just, got wasted. I don't think that's how it should be done. At the same time, when we're talking about war, what does professionalism mean? Because, these guys use polite language and game theory and all this mess and analyze all this stuff, making it lines on maps. I fucking hate lines on maps. I like William Spaniel, though, but, pretty difficult to reach out to these people. If you basically put down the whole war thing to lines on maps, then this shit's gonna happen again. This is how it gets sanitized. War and stuff and the hard subjects, they should not be easy to consume. You should be able to, get angry. You should be angry. And of course, I can't always talk about tragedy, which is why I do the Vatnik thing, but by making this previous episode, I understood that, why the hell should I give a shit about what media who do a worse job than I do, objectively worse, For starters, I know that I am better than everyone else who just uses Institute for Study of War, because Institute for Study of War, yeah, they just skip a bunch of text in when they use a source. Heck, they have cases where they like put a source of a telegram kind of a post, and the only thing they use from that post is literally the number of the unit. They ignore the fact that something's going on there. Their predictions are trash. They ignore Vatniks. Why do I want to speak like in the professional way? I mean, the same goes on with like New York Times, who for some reason have decided that a journalist living in Moscow, half Russian, half German. Yeah, it's totally fine that Kadyrov's men just take her on a tour through Kursk region, escorted by the same guys who shot Anna Politkovskaya and all this mess. I mean, kind of got ashamed of all this mess. Got a bit too official. Started making these shows for the press and everything. Tried to not be offensive, Hoped it would help. You know what that helps? It helps me be bland and fucking repeatable by AI. I mean, if you think about it rationally, I am not joking because when I say that, yeah, I am objectively better in the analysis than and a bunch of these people. I have to say that Kiev Independent, though, if you want to read something that's more academical and professional about the war stuff in English, then hey, go to where Anthony Barthaway works and his friends. Kiev Independent are good guys, are amazing. Moscow Times and all this mess too. But otherwise, holy shit. I mean, I can literally post a picture out there where at this point Vatniks consider the Telegraph and Washington Post to be like psyops, which are pro-Putin and all this mess, and no one will care. And yet again, I probably can do whatever I want, but again, I'm gonna listen to a bunch of people saying, "Oh, who could have predicted all this mess?" Fucking stupidity. Bit of arrogance too. Well, you know what? I can do this stuff as well. Didn't start out this way. This show is there to be in depth, to be for people who care, and to be serious. And of course, yeah, I'll be more organized sometimes, and I don't think I'm going to swear that much, not as much as the 13th guy. But yeah, I hope you've noticed that I've changed the format a bit, because, what's the point of listening to me if I'm just boring? So this time, I'm going to do what, like I said, when you've asked me, and deal with the weirdest stuff that I have never told you, and maybe that you haven't heard. About Ozzy, and why he matters, and my dad. Yeah, I know. It's fucking dumb, but I feel like I have to do it right. Dad was born in 1957 in a small town called Luban. At that point, in their early childhood, the only music that really existed was like some academical music and some weird Soviet experiments. See, as you know, if you listen to the show for a long time, Dad was a musician, but he also was a massive history fanatic. Which is why I know that officially, although if we look at the influences, opinions differ, but in popular culture, the term metal started with the Black Sabbath song Iron Man, because someone in a review, I think for Rolling Stone, just noted that, oh yeah, this is harder than rock, this is like metal, denoting the whole name. Dad also taught me that, how the first ad jingles were invented, because Mr. Haydn in Vienna decided to open a cafe, and then he just put it there. And there were experiments in Soviet era with music as well. Some of the weirdest shit that I've heard, which is unlistenable too, comes from the 20s, by the way. Because over there, well, they tried to implement experimental socialism in music as well. It will be very hard to find anything on YouTube out there, but let me just explain it to you that they tried to do socialistic justice there by Soviet standards. Which means that there was a main rule when writing songs. You could not repeat notes they had to be like one after the other. You can only use like a repeat of say do re if you had used every other song, every other note basically, and that was just silly. And then there were like Marxist songs. Yeah, and when I mean Marxist songs, it is like very dumb stuff designed to literally quote works of Marx. Like the famous saying that philosophers have thought about changing the world, now they should act on it. Yeah, imagine the Soviet Army choir sitting down and singing philosophy, 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 and like Marx knows also could just go there. It was silly. Popular music from like the 30s and from the interwar period, that was gone, prohibited, banned. And up until 65, we really can't talk about any of that stuff. We had our song and dance festivals and folk things, but, doesn't really matter at that point. Something that is, noticeable as popular music, stuff that you listen for fun, only appeared in the Soviet Union, or at least over here, when I speak about Latvia, in about 65. My dad was like 8 at the time, so we're going to skip a bit ahead. Because, well, when we started talking, he turned 18 in 75. That was his main years. And he was out there, and I think he worked in the opera from 85 to 2005 or something, that era. But yeah, the weirdest part is that, again, let's talk first about, before we go through the history parts. Again, sorry, this is not going to be organized, because, oh boy, I'm trying to not to cry when thinking about my dad, because for one, like there was a song that I always associate with him, which is like Bard's song by Blind Guardian. Because all this mess comes from him, really. Yeah, and well, he smuggled and made his own vinyls. Those are forgotten mostly, rare even by Soviet standards, as that was like really in the early days. See, theoretically, you could listen to like Western music. They sold some stuff, and they had even like guests and such in like over here. But yeah, where would you get it? All this stuff was like smuggled in, and it was expensive, and like in single kind of in single form. And then you had to kind of spread it around, because oh boy, you could spend like half of your month's salary, which is about 60 rubles. Back then, standard salary was 120 rubles for an engineer. You could spend half of your salary for a good record of I don't know, Billy Idol or something. So people spread this around, and just like some is done with books, people made their own records there. Most popular thing was X-rays. They were called ribs or bones or whatever. They could hold like one of these smaller vinyls. They could be folded around. And remember that my grandma, she was a trauma surgeon. So this stuff was spread around in horrible quality. People just didn't understand the lyrics, but they felt the whole, groove of the music. Music was super important here again, because, we never really had any satanic panic metal music here, which is really surprising, because, oh boy, I probably mentioned this in the previous take. The fact that Ozzy was a legend and this stuff was so important here that when he died, I looked at my news feed, and that was probably the only thing that Vatnik channels, Russian opposition, and Ukrainians all agreed. Because unlike in the States, there is no like panic about metal being evil. That appeared way later. Hell, our national heroes of the whole awakening, they played as hard music as they could. Also, what satanic panic? Soviet Union officially was an atheistic state anyways. For us, that whole thing was about rebellion, not fitting in. Because conforming didn't mean doing some house stuff or something. Not fitting in was an important part. And a lot of people didn't. So didn't my dad. So when you would get these ribs or chest things, you would trade them around until they would break. But you could throw them around very easily. Just like scroll them over and toss them out. Later on, well, they proved to be quite short-lasting, since afterwards audio tapes arrived. Not cassettes. Firstly, there was like these discs with tapes on them. And, well, turns out that Latvia, at the point, especially near the coast, when these tapes arrived, well, a lot of people decided that being an amateur ham radio specialist was their thing. Why? Well, because at the time, Radio Free Europe was driving around the sea, and you could catch them, and then you could, like, transcribe songs there. And because a lot of songs were prohibited, and they were really, really cool. Without all this mess, I don't think, we would be inspired. Because this all came because in the Soviet Union, first music was like I said, 65. And they're basically, what was played in 65 was, I guess, pre-Elvis sort of thing. I don't even know how to describe all this mess. But back in the 70s, where I actually have some information here, when my dad started to be a teenager, at that point, the Soviet Union decided that, okay, people like music. They also made jokes about how the evil capitalist West do their crazy stuff and ruin our kids. But note that you couldn't be a musician. You could be a musician, but you had to finish the college, musical college and everything, and you had to be a registered one. Yeah, this is what people kind of don't understand and forget about the Soviet Union. It's that, sorry, comrade, our village already has a person that is a, bass player. You would be sent after college to work in the area where they didn't have one. Because, well, due to how sports worked in the Soviet Union, again, remember that there were no professional sport athletes as well, and you just couldn't become an artist. There was no profession like that. You had to do something useful. You couldn't make money with your work. You just couldn't make songs and sell them. If you didn't work in a factory or some place that you were assigned, well, then what do you mean doing stuff for music is a hobby? And you just couldn't be an artist either. You had to do everything in an organized fashion. Those people who really, praise the Soviet Union, I don't know what they expect. Like, the same thing as I watch other people who are like hardcore tankies on YouTube, and they go like, oh yeah, your little pizza shop will be owned by the collective workers. Yeah, cool. But that doesn't mean that, why would they work in a pizza store, a small one, and try to grow it? What's the point? I mean, this whole mess of regulations is the part that people forget, really. But in the 70s, to be organized, if you wanted to be an athlete, you had to count as working in one of these kolkhoz factories or whatever. The same was if you played something else that wasn't an academical music, orchestra. Because you could play in the opera orchestra, you could play in the theater orchestra, you could do something, you could be in the army choir. But if you just wanted to be, in a band, you had to be always accounted for all this mess that was just all this situation. And we didn't actually have a thing called a band. It was always like this. We didn't call them by the band names in traditional order. It was always like vocally instrumental union of the kolkhoz of fishermen who are from that and that city who use the name this one. And then they start playing rock music. Because, well, of course they are doing for the worker things. Oh yeah, and you couldn't have more than one. And this went down to like the most bizarrest situation ever. Since, if you decided to just be a solo writer and everything, you had to also have a profession. In the later years, by the way, Viktor Tsoi was officially counted as working as a person that throws in more coals into the heater. That was his profession. Because, well, again, No musician, no nothing. But Dad managed to be one of those things, and with the tapes they started circulating. And again, remember, no one understands English at all. Which is why, by the way, Andreado Celentano made his big hit about where he just pretended to speak gibberish, but that meant nothing. But it was very popular here. Only later, some lyrics started to be understood, but it didn't really matter. It was all about vibes. The special thing with these whole mess with the organizational, very proper bands was the Soviet Army popular music band Little Star, and they were sitting in the army barracks next to a sporting hall nearby where I live right now. And you could only work there. That allowed you to work there and treat it as like your mandatory military service. Yeah, that was a part of it. My dad wasn't as lucky. He had to spend his military service playing in an actual orchestra. The worst part was they had to play all the time in every dumbest place ever. Dad said the most depressing thing was that he plays in an orchestra and he just has to play in an army funeral for his classmate who just returned from Afghanistan, dead and such. However, because of sheer planned economy and stupidity, for cleaning of instruments, they could ask a liter of vodka each or just pure spirits. So that's how they survived. Because proper music actually sort of functioned there. These guys, by the way, when they worked in this army unit, they had also this orchestra part. Imagine this. Your local rock band, which is just there to count on for this stuff. Yeah, they were also forced to play in the mornings for the pleasure of these soldiers. Also, when we were studying music, like doing musical college, there was a forced labor. Yeah, imagine this. You're studying in college, which is hard to get into, by the way, because people forget that, people know that Soviets had education for free, state-sponsored. However, what they don't mention is that they had only state-sponsored. Which means that, you couldn't actually pay to study in your university. And say, if the musical academy takes in 20 people, then they take in 20 people. And if you're the 21st, well, sorry, bro, army, it is. Sometimes it's kind of weird, but, it's one of those things where you probably don't even imagine that the spots that the government subsidizes, short education is for free, but, there's 10 spots around. This is how they managed to ensure that, not too many of these uppity people went to do this intelligentsia nonsense. Now, in some cases, this whole challenge was pretty rough. And when you got there, then, of course, every summer, it wasn't enough to just, do well. No. You were sent to these kolkhozs. You weren't there, part of them. But you get sent all over the place. You had to basically do manual labor to help with dealing with all the harvest or whatever works. Usually it was just, pretending to work because most of these kolkhozs were super inefficient. It was total garbage. But, there were some sneaky people out there. One of the best things in Latvia was that there was a town called Lielvārde. That's where my favorite beer lodge place, so beer slayer, comes from. That is the only place in Latvia where, out of all the town and surrounding area, literally no one was deported. Because they had a kolkhoz uniting all this place called Lodge Places, and it was run by Edgars Kauliņš. He was a party member. He managed to start working there just after the war in 1947. And he just, was actually competent. During Khrushchev's era, by the way, he just, when everyone was forced to plant corn, which doesn't grow here, he just planted the corn just around the fields and everything. And again, in 1949, during those repressions, he was influential enough to just stand and state that, nope, we don't have any kulaks or disloyal people here. The only city where no one was deported. Sadly, of course, for some reason, some people are starting to view him as controversial because he was also a party member and all this nonsense. But come on. This is just silly. The idea that you have to be perfectly squeaky clean and that any, subordination to and working with the powers that be would be, something that people just would do seems kind of silly. And that goes for everything. I don't know. This, by the way, is done by people who say that they defend their ideals and who work from purely academical perspective, right? And when they say this, when they judge these people about how they don't, how they have this, shameful thing in their biography, right? And I'm thinking, you haven't seen a dead body. You're sitting here and you just know everything just theoretically. You're criticizing someone, but I know that you do the same thing. And they can analyze this from an academical perspective all they want, but I don't know, seems kind of dishonest, really. And at the same time, this guy, unlike another kolkhoz, he took in my dad and other people who were with him from this musical academy, and unlike places where those kids were actually forced to do something, imagine this: you're like a college student, you're moved to kolkhoz, and he said the simple thing: here's like all the beer you can drink. If you run out, let me know. All the other snacks and food is over there. I have one request from you. I need a concert for the workers every Sunday. And God forbid, if I'm going to see you anywhere near the fields, I will kill you personally. And I mean, that was one of my favorite stories that Dad told me because, when this guy gives you, a month of vacation and then pays you a proper salary from the Soviet era, and you just literally drink all the beer that you want, well, kind of makes sense. About other stuff, well, that wasn't the only thing that plopped out. In the late 70s, also another genre that I don't even know that existed outside of the Soviet Union was people singing just songs from various plays and such. Yeah, because we like our plays with songs in them. Our national central play, which is actually a comedy, has like multiple of them. However, interestingly enough, those songs, when taken out of context, had their own like weird meanings and everything. We also had a sort of a popularity context, which is just really bizarre, since they called it the microphone, where you were supposed to send in letters to the radio and vote for your favorite song, some sort of popularity contest. Those things lasted from like 65 up until I think 89 or something. Over there, most of the more important things plopped in. Of course, a lot of songs who would have won were controlled and everything, but we got lucky since people who censored music here, yeah, they didn't really speak Russian at all. Sorry, they didn't speak Latvian. That is, they were just mostly Russian speakers. And to counteract this, one of the biggest songs from like the end of the Soviet era, Dzimta Valoda, or your native language, there was like a hard rock band called Līvi, which is like people who come from the coast of Liepāja. And they figured out that they used the lyrics of a Moldovan author by a translation of a Latvian one. So they technically couldn't be sent anywhere. At the same time, we also had this song Bundajo Baltija, or Atmostas Baltija. And I really forgot the Estonian name, which he sung in 3 languages and everything. But as a musician, oh boy. So you want to do a punk rock band. Let's deal with that part first, because if you've noticed, I've been talking about how you had to be assigned to your position. Well, these things could be played only in specific events, because obviously no one would allow anyone looking like a punk to stand on stage, right? So in the very early 80s, first discos appeared. But these discos were totally different than you might think. One of the popular places in Riga was something called Polygraphic Central Club, which was in the current day Anglican Church. And they had a schedule. You could run like a disco party twice a week. And however, the time that was allotted to you to run something, to do something underground, such underground thing, which by the way, cops came in over time. They were, strictly limited from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. And the event had to be educational as well. Because, you can't just corrupt some sort of Soviet youth with your experimental, weird music that comes from evil capitalists. So basically, at the early part of this, for first 15 minutes or half an hour, there were lectures, mandatory lectures. Someone could actually just come over and talk to you about music, or they could show you something educational. Sometimes it was like about totally unrelated things. Because, well, of course, when there was like things happening in space, then there were like stuff about that. Now, if you managed to piss off someone really badly, you could come in and listen to the glories of Marxist-Leninist ideology just before, you get to, enjoy your music a bit. But the problem is that as my dad was kind of like me, he had to do his own lectures there. But the situation is that dad is playing after that, and he's the son of a doctor, but has to do the lecture thing. He normally would start yapping something about Soviet political jokes or something, and just switch the subject when someone arrived. But there were some issues. First of all, he had to sit down there in a full-on suit and just talk. And he had to do this because, oh boy, seeing as my family from my mom's side has a Lutheran pastor in it. Yeah, by the way, my grandma was a daughter of a Lutheran pastor, which meant that she couldn't really get anywhere unless she studied really hard. So they checked on that. And Dad also played for the opera orchestra at the time. And it was extremely impolite and disrespectful, to do something as frivolous and trivial as playing popular music. So, what does he do? As this whole club thing where he had to do these lectures because, well, a lot of people just, don't have the extroverted stuff like I have here and my dad had. He arrived there in a suit, read his lecture. His favorite one was about the pointlessness of fighting against the drunkenness. But one day he decided that, screw this, it's nonsense, because, they're going to come and check. So he decided to just basically get on his punk outfit. They called up the band and decided to basically literally start jamming and blasting some Sex Pistols like stuff, except they managed to just pick a random spot from like Ever Present, which used to be everywhere, communist corner in every facility. They opened up Lenin's Combined Works, random page, and then you guys got to listen to punk rock about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But over here, yeah, singing about Lenin, that was the stuff. And the thing is that, they came and checked, because it was supposed to be a lecture. However, the problem is that technically everything was correct. They are making a musical tribute towards Lenin. The problem was that at the time, that was the first time Dad got arrested. Because opera, like everywhere else, had their own little court system. Well, the court system didn't work like, actual court, but party members were everywhere, and you had to be in some party organization. So then, they called in my dad and started saying that, why would you ever mock Lenin in such a way with such horrible music and everything? Then Dad decided to kind of play back for this. Because At the time, one of his friends had actually translated some textual lyrics of everything. And I remember this always. Dearest comrades, I had to try to experiment with this, since we have a problem with the capitalists. Listen to this song. I will, and then he reads the lyrics of War Pigs, by the way, and says, look at their protest music. They are usurping the real power of the communist people. Do you not think that the industry is what brings this sound to this hard music? I honor Lenin because I want to show that it's the music of the people. We play rough because that is how workers work. And then he started randomly quoted also whole Lenin stuff. Yeah, you had to read those things. And the problem is that, he was let go that time. But, it was pretty difficult to deal with the other nonsense going on there because, oh boy, they kept coming. They kept on coming, and this just happened all the time. But the biggest issue was that, you could play your band there. You had to register it somewhere. Technically, by the way, my dad's punk rock band, who didn't have a name really, because, they were assigned to a hospital out of all places. Because, why not? Because grandma used to work in one. But mostly that's where you played, just dance music and popular stuff. The problem was, where do you play something that can be danced to? Now think about this. Again, you just smuggle in the tapes or something, and then you kind of copy them all the time. The problem is that, I mentioned on Blue Sky that was illegal. Technically, you could listen to that music, you could just be, publicly shamed. What was illegal was speculating. And speculating means that if you take that record and kind of make a copy of it, if you try to sell it to someone, why, comrade? That is evil speculation, and you shouldn't do this. This is why, by the way, concert tickets, you could buy them for the opera and very academical things. Popular music for a long time weren't allowed to actually take money for their work because you already represent the kolkhoz, comrade. Because things like, music and art, they don't really fit in with the whole planned economy thing. They don't get it, the value stuff. The same, by the way, with Tetris. The guy who invented it, he did it in the later years of the Soviet Union. And he got a proper reward. I think 25 rubles or something. And then Gorbachev assigned the whole rights to the state. It was way later, just after even Game Boy arrived when he first got anything for it. Because again, funnily enough, I find it really weird when these people, who are tankies and hardcore fanatics of socialism, they somehow forget that, okay, cool. But if no private property is owned, when these people try to, explain in these newfangled ways in YouTube all this mess about how actually private properties should not be public property and all this mess. Yeah, I watched a lot of tankies recently. I watched Bad Empanada and all this message, checked them on it, and they don't really think about music and art. They think that they could just run things on their own, and that there would be workers' control in communities. You know what happens with workers' control in communities? Yeah, that was a crime. And again, on the other hand, I do have to say that that stuff that the person in New York is doing, the guy that's about to get elected mayor, I think the Democratic candidate. I looked at his program. I literally opened what we have here in Latvia right now. And, his package was introduced by our nationalistic, more right-wing party as a kind of pro-natalism thing. Free school lunch is just, normal. Just get a proper one. Also, cutting out some streets from New York will actually be good for the traffic. It might sound surprising, but there was a precedent when, because less people, everyone wants to choose the shortest route always, right? And if you cut it out, then less cars go because people pick other routes, and in the end, less traffic jams. Yeah, it is a scientific thing, and I know this because my grandpa used to be a civil engineer, and he explained this weird paradox and mess to me. So, making some roads to be just for pedestrians, A-okay. I mean, honestly speaking, New York is huge. And cars, yeah, you really should have some sort of a entry fee there or something. Or just a park and ride system or whatever. Europe is A-okay with this. You can do it too. You'll drive cars much more. You should drive less, by the way. Also, something for my European friends, while I haven't forgotten, and we speak about this in the next episode, but about cars, people in America, they drive without like automatic. They drive automatic, and they speed and have issues because they have to drive everywhere. And if you have to drive everywhere, well then that's a bit of a problem. The other hand is that over here in this end, how you get a car like to drive somewhere? Because if you were in this kolkhoz and something, and you had like to play a concert, you wanted to do something, or just even you had to figure out how to legally acquire the tapes for the disco. This involved driving, because, well, like I said, speculation is evil. Normally, someone just got the tapes to a person called Juris Lapinskis, and you could he was specializing in the music, because obviously you had to know people. But yeah, he got arrested. He got arrested and put into KGB prison, and his crime was individual economic activity with music records of dubious quality, which destroy the morality of the Soviet man. I mean, I think I should focus on this stuff more, because otherwise you guys think that, I don't know, school lunch is socialism. School lunch isn't socialism. School lunch is more like what you do when you care about your fellow man. This is why divisions are really bad. I mean, you guys wouldn't mind that, in your state, in your neighborhood, or in your little town or whatever, you tend to help each other, right? Well, I know that you guys don't like when the government does it, but, well, it's not that horrible. Socialism, which, by the way, they considered real socialism, is this thing. Because, again, people who consider that, that stock market is evil speculation. Oh, boy. Again, when these youngsters on Twitch who are super idealistic and have their ideas about how socialism works, because these guys talk about real socialism. I mean, no private property in the sense that you can't own your small pizza store and someone has to elect the leader there. Yeah, they only look at stores. They don't know how music would function. They don't know how they would control this mess, because, again, it would only take a single person, like myself or someone else from the Soviet era, who would just say that, oh no, I'm just shedding this like eBay. How do you control eBay? The only way how to do it is literally prohibit everything. So here's my answer to you tankies, and that you can tell them. How would music work? How would you pay for music and everything? And would music count is a band a private property? Do bands elect people as well? What's a manager? If you're a solo artist, what you are? You technically own your own property, right? Or is the rights to your band also owned by everyone else? By the way, Soviet Union also didn't have any intellectual property rights. Everything was owned by the state, and you had no patents either. You had a fee for being a good inventor or something, solving problems. Music, yeah, tough luck. You only got paid your kolkhoz salary and nothing else. In a way, these days people would find it romantic and make art out of it and everything, but the very idea that you could make some random, music, some random sound, money making just with your songs, that was just very weird. Also, another thing is that at this time, Bob Dylan got very popular here in Latvia. Bob Dylan is kind of strange to think about it, but yeah. There's a reason why they still made the remake of this Born in the USA song, except that in Russia right now they call Born in the USSR and all this mess. But that was more like mainstream stuff. Country music was increasing in popularity too, because again, it came from America, and America was cool. Because, yet again, if the Soviet Union yells at you and says that evil capitalist music is ruining our kids, well then, it must be good. The same, by the way, with Star Wars. I think I mentioned it somewhere, but that was a long time ago. Since when Star Wars appeared in Latvia, the first movie, you had to write the description of why this is very useful. So, a lot of people sometimes post on internet about how people who cheer for the empire are like fascists and everything. But for us, it was different. Because to make sure that this was allowed, the review wrote that clearly the Force is a metaphor for communistic values and the works of Marxist-Leninists and these ideals. Clearly, Luke Skywalker is a proletariat ideal. He comes from a farming family, and he fights against the struggles of this large and evil oppressive empire. Clearly capitalists, because they have this whole structure, and they think about owning things. So this is a communist struggle for when Luke is showing how capitalism is evil and fights against it. Yeah, basically everyone in Latvia was started instantly cheering for the empire. I mean, makes sense. Then again, on the other hand, it's about the same situation when someone on Blue Sky decided to talk about open borders, which I really kind of don't get, not fully, because I don't understand what's the whole mess of it. And I just asked about this, and someone just responds, "Oh, you must be white," and I'm like, "Okay, yeah, but what does this have to do with anything?" Because as much as I am, try to figure out how this focuses into anything in Latvia when we have a border with Russia, which we have placed mines on. And if by open borders that means should be let all the Russians in, or whomever, or is it about Africa or something, or is it about migration or whatever? I don't know. Open borders is really cool if you've been moved somewhere or you want to move back to your ethnic homeland or something. But people tend to forget that over here, why also, and we're getting to this, why this is important when it also comes to music, is that, this is our tribal land. We were here since the 9th century, and open borders means that, we will be moved in by other things. But the very idea that, there could be people who literally were the lost pagans of Europe that, were white, and that makes things difficult for people in America. But that is why I kind of don't understand all this cultural stuff. Then again, you have to probably be united on something, but, I mean, race is a dumb thing to kind of focus on, I think. It's more like a cultural thing. But about these folk songs and all this stuff, at one point, we started to really focus on our folk music in a kind of remixing it with a bunch of rock as a way to perform protest songs. And one of these concerts was in 1984. That's just before Perestroika, and that is the most infamous thing where our heaviest band at the time. Right now they're not that hard, but these guys were directly influenced by Ozzy again. They were called Thunder. They were one of the two bands, other one being Levy, who actually allowed themselves to do the riffs and everything, and they played in rock operas as well. And they had a concert in the Estrada of Ogre. Yeah, we have a city called Ogre. It used to be a very popular souvenir among tourists because there was a Lenin's head on a memorial coin for 50th anniversary of Lenin's birthday or something, and it just said Ogre. It spells like ogre. Kind of funny. But over there, they made a concert, and after the concert, to the train that took you back to Riga, well, KGB managed to turn off the lights, and agents provocateur trashed the train. After that, a movie was made documenting all this stuff, a very famous one. It is available on YouTube. It has subtitles. And there you can take a look at really depression and influences of things. It's called Is It Easy to Be Young? Because kids get real real jail cells and sentences and all this stuff. And they prohibited that band to play. It's because, like I said, not because of satanic panic. It was because metal music was considered anti-Soviet. It was considered to arouse the Soviet citizen too harshly. Meanwhile, all these army songs and all this mess, that was perfectly fine. And when I kind of look afterwards at how, in my local Lodz Catholic church, the old priest put on some songs damning metal. Yeah, man. At one point, Catholic church and metal music were oppressed equally, harshly. Both are symbols of some era. It's kind of weird that it's hard to unite on this. And again, because lyrics were poorly understood, they were like translated into Russian, and when like you bought this cassette or tape or whatever, they had like names in Cyrillic. So instead of Depeche Mode and normal, they would like Depeche Mode, all this mess. It's like a meme. And over there, our lyrics, when it came to this sort of music, yeah, they were censored and controlled. We couldn't write about, death and grim stuff. Which, by the way, I also hate all this proper speech. One thing that Soviet Union had was massive control over lyrics. So you could have a hardcore guitar riff, and the song is about, flowers in the spring. Why? Because, well, you have to approve the lyrics with the censorship bureau. And the censorship bureau is full with boring ladies. So it was kind of weird seeing that, the fact that it was even associated with like something evil was just unseen, really. And even today, our metalhead community over here in Latvia, well, they're probably among the most progressive people that I know. And in the sense that they're very liberal. They all support Ukraine. They're very patriotic. And so it's kind of a tool to how people just join together. Really seems strange about how this thing can get like aggressive somewhere out there. Because, the Soviet man needed to read through the lines. But back to the whole thing about the lyric part. If you were working as a journalist over there in the Soviet Union, you had to have a perfect diction. You couldn't make any mistakes. You only could speak about positive things from a pre-read script, and this has led to the standard that TV presenters here have, traditionally higher standards out there. However, I find it kind of silly when you think about it, the corporate language of today, all this corporate slang and all this mess. Yeah, that's closer to socialism than you might think. Since people actually used comrade as a form of greeting, and you had to speak with a certain accent and very clearly. You had to do it properly and politely. I mean, corporate culture is just like Soviet party culture. No one speaks like that at home. And trying to fix that one? I don't know. Maybe people associate socialism with some other things, but the fact that it could be somehow not controlled and not censored, oh boy. I'll say another thing. If you work for a TV station and you work like as this creator of a show, right? Then you had to be evaluated. So yeah. Imagine this. Everything has a plan. Even the news. And it's not about how you evaluate things, because, you pay according to your done deed. So they evaluated people who, at least here, who spoke on TV and radio by a professional linguist who came over and evaluated, he gave you marks based on how professionally you speak. I mean, we can go this far too. Except these days, I suppose it's a challenge about who sounds more like the AI. Sometimes I find it really, really funny how actually modern corporate capitalism, again, maybe some sort of economic horseshoe theory, moves closer and closer to actual real socialism. I've always been saying, by the way, since I read this Project 2025, by the way, that it looks like fascism to you guys. But de facto, if you look at what they want to do, yeah, that's basically how life was like in Brezhnev's era, Soviet Union. Literally, you just replace like the top 1% with the guys who were party members and like ran state factories. And if you think about it, well, look at Elon. Okay, Elon got an insane amount of money from the state. How is that different? If you know, how is that different except that he like owns this whole property? Okay, sure, he may own a lot of buildings and houses and everything, but technically it's the same thing. Again, I find this extremely hilarious how these people who think that school lunch is socialism focus on how, you know, how everything should be like structured and how to take over power and all this mess, and it was weird. And on the other hand, well, some people have tried to actually quote the Soviet constitution towards me. And that is just beyond bizarre. But at that point, when this event happened, you really should check out the movie there. When that event happened, then, for example, poetry and Viktor Tsoi also became popular. Viktor Tsoi, by the way, died in Latvia. He was killed by the KGB. Because, yet again, metal music meant, you know, activity and excited people. Metal music meant that you were not, you know, mellow and just quiet and silent. Metal music meant, and rock music and metal meant that you had to be active. It gave you some sort of feeling of empowerment. And, you know, citizens with initiative in our Soviet country? Oh boy, no. And even some like lighter songs, like more like Beatles, they were so censored that we have a movie filmed in 1962 called Four White Shirts, which was considered so controversial because of the lyrical context of the songs that, that stuff was only shown in 1986, which is just silly. But I do have to say that sometimes actually some foreign artists also arrived. For example, in 1964, we had Covent Garden arriving in Riga, which is just crazy. They played 3 operas by Benjamin Britten. And, well, surprising part was that someone actually spoke English to them. Back then, by the way, learning English was a special thing. If you were a Latvian, you learned Latvian in school, Russian, of course, and then you chose between German and English. As my ancestry involves Baltic Germans, a bunch of people picked German. English was nowhere near common. It was not needed. We lived in the Soviet space. And this, by the way, is why it's hard to understand for like modern people. How come, you know, everyone knows English? But like if you're a professor of the age of 75 who's a well-respected economics professor like Igor Lipsitz, right? Ignoring what he says is just silly. Because when Washington Post then writes about economical situation over there, then come on. I don't know what they use as argument and how they think about this, but just when I read this stuff, which they have gone through a massive research and done a lot of things and explained it poorly, and just basically present as a huge success that they have investigated and found out some magical thing about Russian economy. Yeah, you know, Igor Lipsitz have told this to Ukrainians about 2 weeks ago. He's also been to Austrian TV and said that there. Yeah, because he speaks also German, Spanish, and Italian. But only publications in English apparently count. It's just kind of really silly, don't you think? And the fact is that, well, mine sounds stupid, but because of this professional language and the fact that they just sometimes don't actually care about this mess. Yeah. I mean, for fuck's sake, I'd rather make an episode of it music studies. Sometimes, by the way, there was guest concerts. They had reviews. I made a theater episode. I won't be re-recording that one. But with music, people just drove around, and you had to do them as You couldn't just, go to another city, organize gig in their place. No, no, no. It had to be performed properly. That was a experience exchange trip. It was just crazy. At one point, by the way, Westben, yeah, the West Berlin DJ arrived, and he literally brought at that point what was called record art, where he did the scratchy things and everything. This is crazy, because well, here you go. I highly doubt that anyone in West Berlin or ever in Berlin actually knows where that arrived, but we are silly and we love this stuff. So after that, in 1988, at the same time, with multiple these vinyls, we had like three DJs who could do this. And under a bridge, they wanted to organize the first nightly disco. However, we were run by a communist person at the time, Alfred Rubix, and he declared that this is immoral. And that's also the problem with all these things that morality police is not just for very religious people. Any ideology could happen this way. And in a way, think about how people who are nostalgic for the Soviet era and praise that place. Yeah, they also forget that, that means no phones and no nothing. They think that all of this is just, useless and fake. Again, pay attention. This is also exactly why Putin does not have a smartphone or use a computer. He just considers it to be, worthless. Real man can go and listen to his army songs and all this mess. Oh yeah. And about those songs. Technically speaking, if you played some song written by some band somewhere out there, you couldn't get in prison, but you couldn't also make money from it because no authorship rights. So, technically speaking, if you look at this whole stuff, in modern days, we have authorship laws for a bunch of Soviet songs, especially ones that were very popular at the time. However, I'm still kind of curious about how come no one in the USA figured out that authorship rights do not really exist, and just grabbed a bunch of these songs and just sold them as some sort of exotic thing. Just a bit weird. Then again, there's the other thing, because I remember that when I posted my episode about the space race, I had a sound there which is the beeps of one of the Sputniks. And after that, like in 2020, I suppose, I got a copyright strike because of some sort of Spanish techno guys. Because algorithms are just very, very silly. Also, another thing that arrived here, which was interesting, was this was from Africa. Senegal folk dancing concert. Yeah, you might think it's weird, but for some reason, Soviet Union was supporting, spread of glorious communism all throughout everywhere. So they invited over people from Africa. Some of them had kids too and all this stuff. But it was frankly weird. And here's something controversial out there. See, over here, at that point, no one really worried about, proper naming of things. Because, everyone was just like, the N-word in the States, that was used in a negative context, only when mentioning lynchings and the whole slavery thing as well. And over here, that was just like the default word for things. That's one of the things that I'm kind of interested about, because I recently watched a YouTube video. So, for example, think about this. If you listen to rap music somewhere outside the United States, today, like in Japan, China, hell, Latvian countryside, and you're not a historian, and you have no idea that you can't use the N-word in polite society. Yeah, most people, at least here, outside of the United States, think that it just means, buddy, cool dude, comrade. And, if you arrive in other countries, which I've, by the way, spoken to people, trying to start explaining why that is super offensive just because it denotes something over there, that's silly. Because if you're black and someone, says to you these things over there, well, obviously, unless they're being obviously racist, which tends to happen, then you should sort of just, don't get offended because people really don't know that much of history. Which, by the way, also applies to video games, because when Fallout London came out, which is a game I played recently and like one of my favorite things that I actually play, I remember that a bunch of people were confused when they joined the faction called Fifth Column. Yeah, they're on the very same street where Mosley was. And later on, British people made fun of them about the fact that, they didn't know that they were fascists, because Fifth Column is the name for that stuff. But then I sort of thought that, if you're a gamer and you play like Fallout series, like think about Fallout 4. A lot of people sort of also think that, Brotherhood of Steel, that's fascist and whatever. But now think about this. You have a game where one of the factions is called Minutemen. The only other reference, if you don't know the American history, which actually not many people do, the only reference to Minutemen in that game is a song about 60-Minute Man, which is about sex. And they have Preston Garvey, and they give you stupid quests, and like they're incompetent. No one has any idea what does it even mean. It's like, what? Huh? Also, really, think about this. Underground Railroad, presented as is. Yeah, they are weird dudes who like synths, and who the hell calls their weird-ass band of motley guys Underground Railroad? What? Stupid. So yeah. And then online, however, if you talk about this, everyone just simply presumes that you know everything about this stuff. Again, tiny important little details that people forget. Because we don't know this whole Americanness as well. And at the same time, we just take it somehow very personally. I mean, at the same time, by the way, people who worry about proper pronouns and everything, which, by the way, I got slightly angry at Paradox Gaming. It's an interlude, but I really need to talk about this right now. I wrote an article about Belarus in Substack, really academical one. Worked hard since, well, David's relatives, my wife's relatives, are from Belarus, and they couldn't even come to our wedding. And a lot of people, get confused when I tell them that yes, there's a lot of connections between Belarus and Poland and all this stuff, and that they have been Russified. And Paradox, a company in Sweden, who chose Ruthenian to use in place of Ukrainian culture because of political correctness. They managed to somehow, instead of writing a white Ruthenian for the Belarusian culture, they picked the term that was used in Soviet era with additional S letter, which is the term that currently Lukashenko uses to oppress them. And when I tried to actually talk to them about this, because, hey, everyone's kind of active about this, and, it's a whole nation. My wife's from there. Could you, just, patch in, change of a little single letter? I didn't know how to reach out to these guys, so I was sent to EU4 Discord server. I arrived there with my logo being my podcast thing. I tried to politely ask, providing my name, surname, all this stuff, like, where do I talk about this mess? Because, it can be very much abused and cause trouble. And they sent me to, one of their report boards. And while I was writing my report there where they sent me, they managed to ban me from the server because of my logo, because it was, deemed inappropriate. Yeah, my podcast logo apparently was deemed somehow not according to their rules. And that would be okay. But then their admin wrote to me and explained that, you should have known. You should change the logo. We banned you because of this. Yeah, I'm actually writing about a serious issue that you don't care about. And then, I asked, what do I do next? And then she said, change your logo and do a bunch of stuff. And she was super formal about this. Well, I'm literally originally just wanted to send her a message. And she said, no. And then she, in a private message to me, explained to me how I can't write her private messages. I ended up just ignoring whatever she said and just noted my text over there with with the whole information, everything, and just quit the server myself. They threatened to ban me even more if I would just respond to her, and she was a historian, no less. Shows you that sometimes sometimes people are just a bit cynical, especially knowing that it's Sweden, and they sort of care about this stuff. And I know they didn't mean anything evil with it; they just made a ton of historical errors back then. But wow, sort of strange if you think about this. They would probably yell at me if I would mistake some pronouns somewhere out there. But when I send them links with how literally this word is used to basically make sure that their culture is being erased, literally, of people's, and it's just in the game, and you just need to remove one little letter from it, and they decide to ban me from a logo. Yeah, fuck professionals. I mean, hypocrisy is always ready. But this also happened in the whole Soviet era, because single letters was the reason why my dad, at one point after a concert, managed to get Animal Farm as a gift. Because, like I said, censors didn't just work with music. They also worked with, lyrical text and everything. Thankfully, we're a small country, and if you hear about Russification in Ukraine, remember that there they tried to change everyone's identity to Russian. But here we were much smaller and everything, and then they just decided to, just blatantly dump in enough of people from all over the Soviet Union so that, we would naturally just die out, I suppose. Here, by the way, interestingly enough, my dad was lucky that, people who arrived here due to how Russians view things, because again, they think that Ukrainians and Belarusians are actually just false Russians, that actually saved us in a way. Because, Russians from Moscow, they stuck to their own thing. But yeah, the Belarusians and Ukrainians mostly integrated quite quicker in this whole area. And at the same time, that sort of saved us. Because, people over there were also responsible. Those Belarusians and Ukrainians who were sent in because they counted as Russians, they were often responsible because they learned the language due to their own experiences. They were the ones that were responsible for translating both lyrics and like titles to Russian to show to the Moscow people for censorship then. However, they compared various names and textual meanings with a pre-made list in Moscow with the official translation. Therefore, Animal Farm got published in the Soviet Union as the name of not Animal Farm, but Animal Household. Literally, just a single thing. But as you can imagine, not like the guys who were sent to censor something, they didn't read this stuff. This is why, by the way, there was a popular saying that haven't read this, but I strictly am against this. Which is why, by the way, I know that we sent letters to Hollywood whenever Soviet Union got depicted wrongly about movies that, you had to write review and maybe send it in or just dictate what other parties did, even though you never even could see the movie itself, which is just most bizarre. However, back to the music, since all the lyrics happened, Black Sabbath, again, when they started to sort of translate that stuff, that's considered evil and satanic in the standard analysis of metal in the United States. In the Soviet Union, knowing how that worked, there were no issues with this. Why? Well, they already had an official atheistic newspaper, Bezbozhnik, like godless, right? And Black Sabbath, when you presented it to the censors as anti-war protest songs mocking the capitalist order of the United States. That's because of Dreamer and other things Ozzy did. Yeah, Black Sabbath worked perfectly. Why? Well, obviously they are socialists, anti-religious messaging. That is good. Again, very different associations and different things that people can relate to. And people just don't really even bother to think about it that much. So, the same way, by the way, a lot of other things went through. Iron Maiden had an issue, by the way, out of all the things. Because Well, not because of the torture thing. That wasn't like... We don't call it that way. Iron Maiden is a very specific situation. But people who tried to do something with that band had to write long and brutal explanations that no, this has nothing to do with Margaret Thatcher. Yeah. I mean, maybe it had something to do with it, but I rather presume it was about, the whole torture thing. There were also some very weird names about all this thing happening. Beatles were also just, they tried to translate it as usual, but then they just wrote it like phonetically, Beatles. Black Sabbath, by the way, for a while was really translated Malnais Sabbats or Malnais Shabash. I've seen all sorts of mess of that stuff. Led Zeppelin. Yeah. Led Zeppelin, you could also just spot it in various different names. Led Zeppelin was technically it was like translated directly, except that due to how all this mess worked, as for example, Stairway to Heaven was considered horrible anti-Soviet song because of religious context. It was translated often as Lead Hot Air Balloon. Just type it in Russian. Songs and meanings and trademarks, yeah. I still wonder how this also sort of means, if you think about it, that technically piracy was up there and legal out there because we just couldn't buy it legally. Which, by the way, means that, currently, if piracy is coming back over there and everywhere because Ubisoft tries to make sure that you can't own anything in your games, right? Well, Root Tracker never went anywhere. Our policy over here, by the way, which is done by a lot of indie developers and also CD Projekt Red, is that our root tracker, the biggest thing in everyone who speaks Russian, it's more organized and it has higher standards of like classification and documentation and everything than actually, Amazon itself. It doesn't have ads either. And seeing as we literally sometimes, can't get the games and they're overpriced, there is like literally official company places where they just, they provide tech support for your pirated games on the root tracker as well. Yeah. You know why? Because unlike Ubisoft, CD Projekt Red and other indie devs know that, hey, if he's pirating your game, that means that, we don't have as much money here. Which means that if you're friendly to them, then when they will finally get the money, then they will, actually buy the game. It's a, free advertisement, which works. Meanwhile, I will proudly state that when it comes to Paradox Gaming, I'm not going to send them angry messages, but I'll just take note that when they start to talk about some sort of inclusivity and everything, just open up EU4 Wiki. You can look up Polotsk, right? And if the culture says Byelorussian with 2 S letters, look, open up my article on Belarus and explain to them that that's all cool and well, but that is just like if they had named Ukraine Novorossiya or something. Oh yeah, and when I tried to explain this, they said that that's too political too. I mean, sure, they do everything properly with corporate culture, but just shows that they really don't really care much about this. Which is quite sad, to be honest, because, again, I tried to reach out to them and nothing. I mean, I did not expect to be banned from their boards. If you think about it, it might not even be legal, to be honest. But who knows? But again, sorry for the sidetracking things. I have a lot of this script happening here. Another thing that really happened in music was, because I really tried to check out what happened here, and what happened all over the place was that in 1972, Karel Gott apparently had arrived in here. I know that we have Czech listeners, and I have no clue about who that guy is. And you had to get invitations for this. Yeah, as this guy came from Czechoslovakia at the time, they had a bit different system there as far as I know. But again, you can't sell tickets to these concerts. Except the one like with the Covent Garden, when they arrived, that's opera, that's different. because you pay money to the opera itself, not to the artists. But Karel Gott arrives here, and you can't buy tickets because that's literally illegal. So what do you do? They made special invitations and gave them out to various work collectives. Of course, this immediately meant that they were out there in the black market. Because, yet again, well, your other option is to go to a disco and try to do something experimental and maybe get into trouble. So, Karel Gott ended up basically costing as much as a color TV. And you might laugh about this, but it's 1972. Yep. When we're talking color TV, we're talking about a thing which probably, it looks like it has a tiny screen and has like a lens filled with water and everything. And you had to wait in line for that for like literally 5 years. Note, I have this literally noted here. Yeah, when Reagan told his jokes, Soviet jokes, yeah, those are all like very much real. So, this is very much interesting. Meanwhile, it was very much noted that Mr. Karel Gott, he visited Old Town and drove around with boats. And at that point, by the way, Vladimir Vysotsky, a Russian musician, also was in Jurmala, a popular ski resort here. Interestingly enough, because of all this mess and they're trying to control all the art, because official art was always Communist Party, they met, and that was like hidden. Imagine this: you're a guy in a country, another other person from a socialist country, yet a bit different, arrives, and yeah, they ended up sticking around with my dad's friends, because you can't even meet legally an artist from another socialist country. It's hard really to explain, because yet again, people just think that it was like normal to just go around this, and the Soviet bloc was monolith. Oh boy, quite different. Oh yeah, and I'm sorry about the sound levels. I'm gonna try to turn them up, but microphones just turned a bit weirdly. So, Vysotsky, by the way, in Jurmal over there, pretty much, I know that those bastards, they drank insane amounts of vodka. But that's okay, because weirdly enough, meeting, when two artists meet on their own, who knows what they can do? Do you think that, I think it was all about this whole censorship thing and all this mess, but you had to really figure out how to deal with this. Oh yeah, and for example, in Belarus, who had a tougher time, they couldn't do songs in your own language. Yeah, this is why, by the way, you couldn't do this, anything even remotely related to your own stuff. Nationalism was prohibited strictly. Nationalism in the sense that you cared about your ethnicity. Imagine this, yeah? In the United States, you have like, Irish American and all this whatnot. You could literally go to prison in the Soviet Union for that. So, the idea that, people who identify as some sort of weird mixed stuff, totally illegal. Because you had you had only the Soviet identity. Just the Soviet one. Which just so happened to be basically a Russian one, which was enforced onto this. This is a bit weird because, I used to, in the early days, by the way, which I noted, I used to criticize people that, usually people often use Russians in the form of Soviets, right? But on the other hand, I understand why. However, this also means that in the Soviet Union, every good thing that was done by the Soviet people, they attributed to themselves at all times. Because another argument which people tend to think about when they glorify the Soviet Union is that, the Soviets built this and that for you, like this factory or something. Yeah, I mean, we also were Soviets. It was our own country at the point. And our people built a factory where we couldn't get our own stuff, and that was sent to the army, And then Soviets built things. Glorious. You know what else they did? They literally prohibited a bunch of songs just because they were like actually popular, and they were in Latvian. And they mentioned like things such as I don't know, loving your flag or something. Amazing. When you think about censorship and your rights being oppressed, yeah. Again, I spoke to this with Gabe, but when I spoke with this with Dad too, you know, the very idea that in the United States you might have something as satanic panic or some issue with some board game, that alone was considered just very weird. When I spoke to my dad about how American religious culture functions, he was very much confused because, well, it's quite different over here, but still quite interesting. In the end, you ended up yelling at the same songs and saying that they're like un-American or something and ruin kids. Meanwhile, we praised those songs for being, bringing us liberty and all this mess, and the Soviets yelled at them for other reasons. Well, I guess it's some sort of a partial thing of all this mess. Then again, like I said, the weirdest part is that, one of the heaviest bands that we had at the time, that used to be heavy at the time, then, literally no mention of devil or anything of that sort. If you did mention, for example, an octopus and something about corruption, or you unfortunately made a song which somehow could be interpreted as referring to, something that could tie into the Communist Party. Oh, that was just horrible. And the thing is that at this point, a lot of people there, who were not listening to metal and everything, a lot of people were just trying to actually not talk about all this stuff, to not be religious and everything, because going to church also was prohibited. And might sound weird to you that an Anglican church exists in Riga, but that's a whole different story. But they had turned churches into discos, which means that we sort of associated that thing too. So currently, I know quite a few churches where actually rock concerts happen, with like piano and everything. Strangely enough, Christian music, like Christian metal and all this mess, is much more popular and accepted here, I suppose, than everywhere else. And yet again, might seem to be weird that in a lot of cases we now quite much associate church and such musical things. But yeah, this is another reason why I want to explain all this stuff and why this brings all this context to you, because these are little things that don't get mentioned in books or anything, and then, well, Dad just decided that it wasn't important because it's normal. Another concert that happened when Dad was like, when I was 1976. Yeah. At that point, Roy Clark Country Show went to a tour through the cities of the Soviet Union. And, well, strangely enough, and I can't find the record, he played a song called Pūt Vējiņi. That's a bizarre song because, well, that's one of those interwar songs. It's a song about drinking by your own money, but it's considered, one of those, I'm doing my own thing, technically treated as a patriotic one. And weirdly enough, this stuff got pretty much a lot of, praise. But if he would have been, doing this as Latvian, oh boy, I still have no idea where he learned this or something, but that created hardcore nerve issues to them. Weirdly enough, country music, which is why, by the way, it still remains popular among the older generation. Country music was one of the few American music genres which wasn't considered to be anything dangerous. Like, rock music, evil. Hippie music, evil. Country, like literally country, your classical country, that's okay, because I quote, cowboy is nothing but a simple a simple pastoral worker, and therefore close to the working man. Yeah. I bet some of you just are a bit shocked, but yeah. A country music is the one that was that was allowed, because if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Because weirdly enough, that's proletariat for you. Again, in a lot of senses, we have some different meanings. And at some time in 1981, Italians arrived, Salvatore Adamo and Drupi. They arrived here, and at that point, they did a TV concert, and that's notable because this was the first case ever when our poor TV, at that point in the old studio, had to install a new set of everything, because that's a whole different thing. The problem is the equipment that was installed and produced, because, so that everything would be nice and cool, weighted 3 metric tons of audio equipment. It was bizarre, and it was weird. However, as literally everything that was related to such professional equipment was associated with the opera, yeah, people were just ordered to carry on stuff. And, doesn't matter that you're an artist. You work for the opera, so you just, carry all this stuff. The worst part was that in a lot of those cases, you needed to know how to install everything. Of course, actual, instructions and specific some sort of courses, nope, does not exist. Why? Well, the Soviet Union presumed that your musical college, that wasn't there to make you more creative. That was there so that you could play in the army orchestra, which is quite weird in this area. Because, again, you are supposed to be able to fix your own stuff, fix anything music related, and it would be normal that, if something breaks and for some instrument is like damaged or someone gets sick in, say, I don't know, an army event, right? Yeah, you would be called up from wherever you are to just, replace the person. And sometimes it get even worse because, in a lot of cases, the attitude was so weird that anything besides a piano was considered basically the same thing. And at one point, when Khrushchev was in power, the local people who were sent in to organize all this artistic life, they also had no education in all of this. They were party members. So imagine when you're supposed to practice on trombone, but the guy decides that your dude who runs your whole situation decides that it's the right time to basically, trombone looks like it's made from shiny metal. Let us donate that because we have a plan for copper and other valuable metals. So he donated that to scrap, and politely for other people in the music academy, just brings out clarinets. Look them up. They are not similar. One musical instrument that was really kind of considered evil was the saxophone, because it was related to sexual activities. And anything that reminds you of sex is just evil and horrible, obviously. Metal music also was treated as bad because, my grandmother, she was forced to write reports, because you literally were forced to do this by the party, to write how metal music and rock is harmful to your body. No, seriously, because they had to have some sort of academical proof of this. Was it true? Of course not. However, this is where in all the post-Soviet sphere they have this idea about how all this happens. Because, people trusted these authorities. The problem is that even if you tell them that, a lot of this stuff was just bullshit, they still carry on with this stuff. At the same time, I don't even realize how they managed to do any of this stuff. Meanwhile, the biggest hero with music that tried to work there was Alla Pugacheva, She's a very famous Russian musician. She's like an icon. When it comes to Russian pop music of the Soviet era, of that generation, okay, yeah, I mean, she didn't start the whole genre, but she's like Soviet Madonna, basically. And she played the songs of Raimons Pauls. He's one of the few Latvians that's very well known. Of course, lyrics have to be translated, because, not like anyone will understand the original stuff, so songs that were about, with a religious context out there, like that one was more like a folk song, adapted one, which was about our paganistic goddess Mara and how she, grants good life to a kid. In Russia, it's known as Million Alых Roz, which is about a poet and a million of pale roses, which is just quite strange. But this led to some funny events because, we have some traditional music and songs which were just adapted in the same way, ideally from various melodies that were just out there, from like well known from the Americans and like standard pop music. It was just sometimes a bit strange. My dad used to love this, and if you knew, then you knew. Because imagine this: if you're smart enough and you want to piss off the official government, then you have to write songs. Yes, you finished the musical academy, you have to write songs. So, in a lot of cases, the one that was popular among the people who weren't into that kind of music was a modification of a popular folk song, which goes like, Uz to mums atkal jāiedzer. It's like a toast song, which means like we need to drink on this again. Of course, it was transformed into a funeral song. The craziest thing was that, which happened when the Afghanistan war happened, which was really brutal, was that they tried to bring out a band and try to play the wall and include text about sacrifice for the Soviet Union. I mean, it sounds really, really silly, but it was treated as experimental and too avant-garde. However, obviously, yeah, that's also a way how people understood things. Because if you knew the song, then you kind of understood what happened. And another brick in the wall also had a different meaning here. Because we knew what the wall was, like the Berlin Wall. We knew that walls were bad. But about the pudding? Yeah. The pudding phrase was very weird. Because even today, what that means is just very bizarre and quite strange. At the same time, some shift happened in all of this area. Since at that point, if you noticed, the only way how to get musical education after a musical school was the academical classes and everything. Which is why rock operas are very popular here up until this day. Oh yeah, and Dad also used to always tell me that if Richard Wagner would know what the electric guitar is, he would be playing metal. Which is also very weird because out of all the people that I know, like metalheads love classical music. Why? Because it takes skill and people do things. Oh yeah, and if you don't understand growling, by the way, then think about it as cubism. This is like, you're not supposed to take it literally. You're supposed to catch the notes. It's treated like an instrument rather. It's treated like an instrument rather than lyrics. At least in the most brutal ends of metal. Which, by the way, is how I want to segue into another study, which is very relatively. You know what? I'm gonna grab myself a beer and cut that part out. If I haven't cut that part out, yep, need more beer. But basically, I'm gonna finish this one because there's a Lithuanian band called Gutalaks, and I'm including this because this comes from a Latvian metal fest, and you will enjoy this because Gutalaks, they play grindcore. Grindcore is a parody metal genre. And, well, they don't take themselves seriously. And they play the sort of metal that your grandma, your very old grandma who's 80 thinks all metal is about. They also like to make parody songs, like they sometimes play Britney Spears or something very banal, but they have like songs like sacrificing 999 virgins to Satan in the most darkest evil fjord of the north of Norway. .evil. And then they just like utterly ignore everything else, and well, basically they push on the fact for like shock value and stupidity, and they have various very weird themes. It's like mixed punk attitude with like very brutal metal, and the sillier the better. And Gutalaks has a theme of being sanitary workers. They dress up like, like hazmat suits, and they theme themselves around literally toilets. And, it's quite hard to imagine that someone could sponsor these guys. However, in Lithuania, in Kilkimžaibu, I think 2 years ago or something, their fans, being weird grindcore people. Yeah, grindcore people are seen as weird by other metalheads as well. Well, they decided to just pick up a toy and just start they ripped out the doors. Toy is the plastic toilet thing. And one of them started surfing on it and they started throwing it around. I'm afraid that someone got stuff on themselves, but again, it's grindcore. They embrace that nonsense. And you would think that that's some tragedy or something. But I do have to say, how else? There must be a genius in the marketing of these portable toilets of Toy. I know this brand, and now they're associated with it. They decided to sponsor this band instead. So now they have their own portable toilet. Everyone knows Toy, and this is some sort of weird genius. This, comrades, is when marketing is art. Because, yep, these guys advertise on the grindcore band. I love it, and it is amazing. Just adding this into all this mess. But yeah, over here, classical music and rock music is the same thing. And, even if you don't listen to, metal, rock music is still a part of everything, because that's like part of our patriotic things. So yeah, if it wouldn't be for Ozzy, who made loud sounds and did crazy things, well then, it would be a bit weird, wouldn't it? However, it was pretty interesting since the same musicians who wrote rock songs and everything, yeah, he decided to write academical music because, you could take your rock band and put them with instruments. Which is why also it wasn't weird that my dad played bass in a punk rock band. Which was interesting because this was the first time when in the late 70s, in the big academical Philharmonic Square, a fourth symphony of Imants Kalniņš was played. And at that point, it was a legendary event because, of course, everything had to be attended by the party members. They had reserved spaces. They rarely arrived, but this time they kind of came in because Imants Kalniņš was considered the patriotic one. And normally, it was filmed and documented. However, everyone already expected that, by the Soviet standards, as, by the way, is today in Russia, you would go there in, formal dress. However, this was the first case ever where about, 1/3 of the people in the hall, people who came to check out a patriotic poet, national hero, writing a classical piece of music. All the other part was basically my dad and friends and everyone else who just arrived wearing long hair, dressed up in ripped up jeans and everything. And that was confusing because, at that point, my grandma noticed this event too, because she through her workplace was there in the part where where the intelligent people sat, the proper ones. After that, there was a long discussion with Dad because she simply could not understand this. Because, different people, same association. This, by the way, again, is tied together. We have a rock opera about lodge places, and we have a rock opera about our other people, and we have one about drugs too. Opera and rock is a thing that really fits together. I think the most famous one, which is one about our biggest railway robber, which is crazy. Interestingly enough, 88 was interesting because at that point, finally, you could start singing songs which basically were these interwar Latvian songs, basically. It was allowed. Latvian flags were allowed. All this stuff. Then, by the way, we started experiencing some freedom. For one, in 1989, there was, in Riga, there was something called First International Latvian Doctors Congress, which meant that a band arrived here, which is now a legend. It was called Chicago 5, the Chicago's Piecīši. This was a band that was found in 1961, and they played more like American pop songs, basically. Sadly, they, just like many other bands from that area, well, they're super pro-Trump now, which I honestly don't get, but hey, I hope that I don't decide to go crazy at that age. But it's kind of interesting to see how these artists change. We also have Godfather of Metal, another artist which was a massive alcoholic, but well, now he's ultra-orthodox. And not because he found God, because he has shifted over to these weird imperialistic views. I was taking a short break here, and then I came back and looked at other stuff and read an email. And you know what? I think I have reached the point where I have finally achieved true Gonzo. For one, I can tell you that from everything that I follow currently, after especially checking my episode 300, yeah, I am 100% confident that the facts will now speak for themselves. And there's me and Kiev Independent, and you can basically just ignore, like, you might as well read like Tatarigami and other sources. Then there's like Media Zone and Verska who do investigations, but they don't work in English that much. Well, Media Zone does, but they do their investigation stuff. But from general media, yeah, that moment when I understood that, holy shit, I not only know for a fact that I'm right, but I also can point out exactly why other media are making errors and mistakes and why they ignore me. Wow. Yeah, I guess this is how Level Up feels like, because I have stopped caring about this. For starters, I'll get back to this. I just want to inform you. These guys, they have an English language bias. I really started noticing this with Igor Lipsitz, because they not only use bad sources, which they prioritize, because I also checked. See, they only look up things in English, because to most of them, well, everything that has a native English translation is automatically trustworthy, which isn't the case, really. And secondly, because they also treat everything and everyone who doesn't work in English, like Professor Igor Lipsitz, who has been not only to our region everywhere, but also to Austria, Italy, and everywhere except English language countries, because he speaks Spanish, Italian, German, and Russian, right? He's 75. He doesn't speak English. I mean, I've even sent that interview transcript to a bunch of people. A lot of people. It's like, they don't even bother Googling him up. And then Washington Post does bullshit, like I said in the beginning. And then basically I've also sent emails to everyone. Warfronts, by the way, I sent them a long email with evidence and everything, a polite one, and they just didn't answer. Then again, they're not journalists, so they're YouTubers. And I know the difference because, I have press law and they don't, and, well, two different things. And then there's the classical academical bias towards people from Eastern Europe. They asked about this to both Evet's mom and my other scientist friends, and standard academia stuff is very liberal and normal. However, if you come from like one of the bigger universities, then who are, by the way, right now pro money, then yeah, for some reason, they don't like to admit that that we should be listened to, and so our emails get skipped and everything. And with all of this combined, I can honestly say that I've written to everyone about Kiev Independent. I have read them. They are good. They are also the only ones who are competent about FPV drones. And I know this because I fly them, and you know that. And yeah, with Kiev Independent, I could argue minor details, some points, or for academical reasons. I think, in general, I know that they go through exactly the same thing as I do. At this point, the final straw was the fact that Deshar Garusic, right? They now claim in their site that the Telegraph is and check this out, pro-Putin media funded by English Crown that's there to ensure that Russia collapses. Like, if you've listened to my previous episode, you know perfectly well that it actually is perfect sense, but, oh yeah. You know what? I'm glad that I made this thing. It kind of opened some brain cells to me. This is the point where after like in my 13th year of working here and putting all this stuff in, yeah, I no longer feel like I'm somehow inferior to my Western colleagues because I know my stuff. Huh. Okay. But now back to the stuff because, well, this was weird. It was a hard thing to understand, but what can I do? Oh, yeah. And if you're listening to this and thinking that I'm, exaggerating, feel free. Listen to the episode 300. Listen to my predictions. And if you think that I have made some errors or I haven't taken something into account, please, I'm ready to argue. I'm ready to exactly argue everything there and debate. Because, well, I don't possibly see any other option here. Ta-da. Oh, yeah. By the way, I was supposed to talk about theremin here because that's the electronic music instrument. But it turns out that in my notebook, Dad had crossed out the word theremin and said, "Don't talk about theremin. Theremin sucks." Well, okay then. So I have 3 studies remaining for you. This is a long one, I know, but it was a journey for me. It's, I hope, interesting for you. If I speak slower in the previous parts, sorry about that. I explained this at the beginning. There is some things too about all this musical stuff that some stuff that I can only tell you now. First of all, is that first of all, I'll start with a minor detail. My grandma, very faithful woman, religious. Yeah, she had poor hearing, and she didn't really approve of metal and all this stuff. She viewed it with suspicion, except until the point where back in the day when she needed a phone call, like phone ring sound thingy, then she decided that this might be useful, and she did. The problem is that when we went to church, she didn't turn off the sound. And you can just imagine that we're sitting in our Lutheran church, and my grandma gets a call. And the sound that I put on to her phone was Red Alert 3, Hell March 3, the Red Army tune, the theme song, And that was a bit interesting because nobody really, I knew the name. I was like a bit awkward. But at that point, everyone just starts looking at my grandma and she's like, "Come on, I can hear this. This is good." At that point, it was a bit weird. Yeah. She also argued with my dad about music quite a lot. She apparently wanted my dad to play the piano. Then he started playing cello. And then he kind of broke his finger or something. And he had to switch to the bass. But, he carried that bass all over the place. Kind of weird thingies. And, at the end, by the way, when he finished his musical academy, he looked at his diploma, and turns out that they had entered his profession as a bass player, teacher. This teacher allowed him basically later in life to teach basically every subject that he was competent in, which was mostly history. And, he also did just that, which is weird because, history was just his hobby. Meanwhile, as he was teaching stuff, he also spent a lot of time teaching smaller kids. But my dad, being a teacher, actually saved my butt quite a lot. We had to write a sort of a scientific work at the 12th grade. The moment where you sort of do scientific work. But I was too busy preparing for university and all this stuff, and I was bored. And I knew history well enough, and my dad taught history, that I just went to my buddy and took his first year coursework about Operation Barbarossa, changed the title page, and then spent the time telling other classmates about various facts from World War II. Dad put me a 9 instead of a 10, which is the maximum grade here, simply because then other teachers would have to read it, and I might have to be sent somewhere else. So that was a nice little way. But with that, we also had probably a weird study when in our school I have now seen every possible work. Mikalons, yeah. But no, I'll leave that for Tauro because I want to leave this otherwise. From the musical part, Dad also had an interesting thing. He as a musician had a tendency where he just decided that if someone else has forgotten some lyrics or is singing some tune, he would instantly sing louder to fix them. This led to some bad cases where he started doing that with his colleagues, and then it got a bit intense. Meanwhile, that was in later years, but he started doing that before this. And then the two things that are just weird. At one point, they were at a party, and one of our musicians who are in our weird trademark system, Akala, the guys who control all the trademarks here for musicians, and they are literally assholes because, they represent the authorship rights for everyone, but they also sort of have fined Latvian punk band P&D for just giving a private concert to their friends in a way. But at one point, Dad just decided, in a random event where he was properly drinking. Booze studies, I think, also will be a separate thing. I have just spoken so much, and it's been a journey for me. At one of these events, he decided that, some random people arrived in the party place. And as he was just jamming in the corner, Gunter Srach just arrives. I don't remember at whose house it was. It was probably one of these places where it was probably Muktupavels. It was one of those Latvian musicians there. But yeah, Gunter Srach arrives, pukes in the corner, leaves. The rest of the people, you know what they do? They took the spray paint, that laminate stuff, and just spray painted it over. And for about 10 more years, it was like a point where they poked at it and said, "Oh, look at this. This is what Gunter Srach has vomited." And then there are two things that, well, I'll tell you and you'll understand. The first one, both of the things I can tell now when he's passed because, my dad was a very peaceful and calm man. But he actually has punched a student once. It was that was an adult student in the countryside school. And trust me on this one, well, it was pretty deserving. Like, he didn't punch him in the face, but he did smack him because that was just confusing. We were doing, that was back in my high school days, already way past everything else. And Dad was preparing us for listening because our choir participated in the regional song festival, all this song stuff. And he was playing bass there together with a bunch of other teachers and some group and something. I don't exactly remember how, but we ended up in the Ogres Estrada on top there eventually. The problem is that we're driving with a bus. There are a ton of we have a friendly car rivalry with the guys in the next car who are playing all the blowing instruments, trombones and all this stuff. And then Dad decides that he wants to stop and go to the bathroom, On a way to Ogre, I think it was Madlien or something. It's in the middle of the country. And while he's there, he politely asks everyone, "Hey, do you need to go anywhere?" And we're driving into this 9-seater bus with his bass in the back. And, everything seems pretty normal. Except, some kids run off to grab some snacks in the local store, the usual things. And my dad is just talking with the driver and they're smoking. And he double checks everything. And I by the way was in the other car, so my reaction was a bit awkward. So Dad just talks to everyone, asks everyone yet again if something if they need to go to the bathroom and stuff like that, and then they drive to Ogre. In Ogre Sestrad, everyone needs to dress around, and one of the guys is just missing, from the people who are supposed to play in the band. And you can't really do that because, it's a band. But then Dad decided that, you know what, we're here, and that dude, it's own fault, kids get lost. He's 11th grade. And we're just waiting until something, has to start. I was given a random instrument. I don't know what. I was put in like the very end of like the place where people stand, and I was told, you just don't play anything. You'll screw it up. Just pretend that you're playing and don't fall around. So I did. But when we start doing this, well, they start playing. I'm just standing there. I was supposed to photograph that place, but whatever. And Dad's bass sounds weird. Just off. Something's off, really. Just doesn't do right. And he checks the strings, and I don't know how he tunes this stuff, and it still just is very weird. And then he kind of starts to shake it, and he understands that there's something inside his bass. Weirdly enough. And he moves aside, and when he kind of has to look through stuff, but you can't understand what's exactly in there. It's kind of interesting. Well, Dad has to skip it. This is a weird situation. They kind of skip this stuff, so Dad wasn't in there. I was just standing, just pretending that I'm doing something. After a while, we leave the stage. That's the least important part. And the guy who was supposed to play there, he's just sneaking around quietly, like pretending that he doesn't exist and apparently going somewhere. And I'm just checking on him, and he just scarily looks at me and says, I'll meet you in school. Like, just tries to ignore me completely, and is just super scared. And I'm asking him, yeah, his name is Jan, it's very default, like Latvian version of John. And he just ignores me, and seems like, like a ghost would follow him. At that point, I'm like, well, okay, fine. And he goes somewhere, I don't know, people are weird. I'm mingling around there, doing my things. And then this was the first time ever when I heard my dad scream loudly. He had actually never screamed at me because he spoke very loudly, yes, but that was a scary sound. Those of you who actually have had the honor to meet my dad, and some of you are, well, you know what happens when he just starts yelling. He basically was the level of an alarm siren. And then he ran out and asked me, well, where is Janis? Well, much less asked than, other kids are just carrying the bass and look scared. Two of them have pulled out their phones, and Dad is just pissed off. Okay, I'll tell you the second time he was that pissed off. And, well, he runs around. He managed to grab someone's phone. And, we were at a small school in Taurupe. He picked up the phone, called the parents of this Janis guy, and straight up told them that he doesn't care. He will go to their place and bash their doors out, and he will find Janis. And if when Janis arrives home, they must take him to him, or there will be massive issues and trouble. And he's just, he's not joking. And they're confused. But I'm like, he's screaming. But he says that, well, okay, if Janis is hiding, then he'll show them. And he's angry. But all the kids are just following this, and everyone's just so confused. Well, it's a district, and my dad is never violent at all. The only thing he yelled at me is like when I made a bad move in a video game or something. He just is pissed off, and instead of avoiding the cops, he runs towards the cops, grabs a couple of kids carrying the bass, and tells me to come with. He goes to the police, who also, by the way, were in the choir and everything. And he manages I was running behind because I had to, pick up other stuff and everything. But when I arrived at the car, even the cops were angry and said that, if Janis tries to escape, then they will punch them personally. And they have no idea what the fuck is going to happen to them because this hasn't happened before. Well, the thing is, Latvian countryside. Dad was pissed off, but, no one wants to go to prison. And then, we drive with a cop car, where is my angry dad, who has now threatened the parents of his kid, of one of the kids, of the 9th grader, or I think it was ninth grader, one of the ninth graders. I don't remember exactly. He literally called his the kid's parents, threatened that he will literally do physical bodily harm, went to the cops, told them, apparently, and now the cops are angry too. This is getting interesting. So we arrive there, and in front of the house, the parents are basically there. Janis apparently has been caught by the principal of our school. Was a history teacher. Apparently, he has told the principal also some stuff. So now principal is just holding him and saying that, pick one, because you could go either way. Basically, Dad decided to solve the situation in a very simple way. He just went there and said, you can insult me. Like him. You can, do whatever. But this is just, this is just fucking dumb. He just basically... gave him a punch in the chest, the one that the kid could feel, but not the type that would do some harm, and said that, okay, you get this done, or better yet, you get this done somehow, and then we'll be fine. But holy shit! And I was still confused, but apparently parents also knew. But imagine the situation. I'm the only one who doesn't know. There's a principal of the school, kids' parents, my dad, and cops, and everyone is holding the kid and allowing my dad to just smack him once because they're pissed off. Well, what turned out is that for some unknown reason, while I was smoking and reminding everyone, hey, there's the bathroom, go and do your stuff, the dude had decided that, he kind of doesn't want to leave the car, and he feels kind of shamed. So he literally took a dump inside my dad's base. And then he thought, oh well, what the hell? And threw in those little Red Bull cans as well inside there. Why? Well, his answer was, well, I was kind of shy and there was already shit inside of it. Now, I can't really explain to you how base functions, right? But first of all, I have no idea what... He had cleaned the strings with his clothes or something. I have no clue. Because you have to remove the string. It's a lengthy and dumb process. And just... I did not understand this. What I did understand is that... what else are you going to do? Write a police report about someone shitting in your music instrument? To be frank, that is one of those cases where I'm sitting and I'm just not realizing what the hell to even do. I guess this was the best solution. Because, these things did happen. Oh, and then because of my own music choices, I could just get yelled at. But also by the principal and Dad. Back when in Taurup, I was living in that school, and, Dad went off to organize the choir and, all these little people who do various sorts of dancing and other activities back there, in the culture house in the village. Well, I was a teenager kid. I had just discovered Korn and Tool music bands. Also, I was listening to Slipknot at that point. Well, I had a bunch of new stuff that I want to listen to. So I come home after school and decide that what would be nice? Taking a nap. I was just recently arrived. It was just after winter break. And then, as Dad's not home, I decided to do extremely cool stuff, put on maximum loudness, because when you're 16 or 17, you sort of start thinking that when you listen to metal, everyone else should too. And I take a nap. I am awoken by the fact that extremely angry Dad is just bashing the balcony, really hard bashing at the balcony. And yelling something which I don't know. Our balcony was closed with a glass door there. I panic and run, but not to the balcony, but to the central door of the apartment and unlock it. What? Then Dad runs in. And I think, I'll try to remember, he was really good at swearing. He used, a Mongolian swear word, exclusive ways. Oh, yeah. maybe ever cursed the carpenter who made the bed where I created you. And if I like, I must give you 2 condoms, one to put on your head so that everyone sees that what a large dick you are, and the other one so that you don't make more. He liked artsy swear words. He even called me in his direst, most evil way of swearing, which he had learned, by the way. He called me an aesthetic. Funny for a musician. What turned out was that I was a stupid kid, and I had left in the keys on my side. And normally that's okay, because I would have woken up if only I hadn't drank a bit of beer, because, well, Dad's not home. And then just put on metal on the loudest. Decided that, you know what? I'm hearing knocking from my neighbors at one point, and I don't know, I was sleeping or something because I didn't remember. I had just turned off the whole, loudspeakers and put on headphones on my head, and peacefully napped. Apparently, I had thought that Dad was supposed to be home at about 6 p.m. At that point, it was about 11. Yeah, that was not nice. What had happened was that, Dad had tried to unlock the door, and nothing worked. And then Dad had run upstairs and smacked me through the ceiling on the floor to try to poke me. Well, because other doors, neighbors, and everything didn't work. Poking through walls, yelling, nothing happens. He threw rocks at the window, nothing happens. My cell phone, totally ignored. And then he decided that, he doesn't really have much choice. He knew that, our school, obviously, in a countryside school, it was in a manor. You can look up Taurupe. There's a manor there. Inside there, there was supposedly a couple of stairs. Dad couldn't find the keys of these stairs. He then moved because we lived in the Khrushchevka building, and our director of the school, he lived literally next door. He calls the director, goes and says, "What's up?" The director says, "Wait a minute. What are the keys? Where are the people who are supposed to heat the house, heat the school and everything?" Well, turns out they're not there. So then the school director is worried because someone is no one's guarding the school with the keys. Dad can't get in. I'm peacefully listening to, I think either 10,000 Days or Yambi, I presume at that point, yeah. I know that Placebo Pure Morning also was playing. I'm happy at that time. Basically, we try to call this guy. He just doesn't answer at all. And he's the one with the keys. Well, he wasn't found until a couple of days later, because apparently he had decided that no one's going to enter here, and just, went and got drunk with the physics teacher, and they had passed out in the little side building where we used to study, home economics and physics at the same time, basically. And they had been wasted and locked up everything. But because, some things need to be locked up and things are getting problematic, well, Dad decides to call up a locksmith. But their dad showed me that he's, after all, my father. Yeah, my dad and I share his genes. Because what do you think? He calls a locksmith, he unlocks the doors, and people are happy? Oh, no. He goes and drags the locksmith to the school. Then he settles the fact that they're going to split the cost with the director. At this point, it's pretty late. And, they unlock the doors where the stairs are. That's all cool. Then Dad grabs the stairs. But then he understands that those doors kind of need to be locked. While he's running with the stairs, he just runs to the balcony, puts the stairs down, and, discovers that these stairs are not, large enough. So he goes next door where the postal office is and the culture house building. Because, again, they have taken the stairs from the school and paid the locksmith to unlock the doors. Now the stairs are just getting around there. So, okay, stairs are left with the director. The director is pissed off horribly. Because, again, this guy had to drive. Then they enter into the culture house. Apparently there, I did not know this, but, line dancing was really popular. I think it's line dancing, right? the one which is like, your American style thing. It was really popular because, again, I think because in Soviet era it was considered proletariat or something, like country music and German Schlager is basically united in Latvia, which is quite interesting. And turns out that all these people, they decide that, holy shit, what's happening is much more interesting. Someone runs and grabs a few beers, because like everyone's doing that stuff. I think it might be one of my old classmates too, because we had these people there. They're now picking up the stairs and everything. And it ends up with a bunch of people dressed up in country, like their uniforms are practicing their line dancing stuff. There are beers being passed around. And my dad, who was quite heavy at that point, he's being helped up on slightly taller, weird metal stairs. We lived in the third floor there. Somehow, with the help of also the second floor neighbor and a bunch of other situations, he moves through balcony and through various contraptions. I was sleeping at that point. I don't know the exact story. I was being yelled at. Well, somehow he gets onto the balcony. And he's yelling, and he's angry. And then, from his perspective, it looks like he's finally done this. The money has been spent. Everyone around him is just cheering. Beers are being drunk, photos are being made. It's just crazy. And at that point, when he finally looks at the door and thinks that, yes, he's going to get in, he has some hope. At that moment, I run off and disappear from sight. Unlocking those doors and standing there, not hearing my dad at all. I stood there for a while until Dad got angry enough that he just basically kicked in the balcony door. Then I heard a bunch of swear words. After that, I heard loud cheering from below. Well, that was a fun video, and as I was graduating from high school, that got into my yearbook. Because, this is a funny story now. But the director wasn't happy. But, well, at least the pictures were quite funny. But yeah, we really can't think totally straight. But that's not the most epic story ever that I can tell you about my dad. This also sort of relates to my grandma. It's one of those things which I had to verify, actually. And I did. But, Dad's done a lot of drunk nonsense. A lot of it. I mean, look, I have a half-brother, right? We share the same dad. We share the same birthday. Our moms were best friends. Dad was, as a father, he was more of a bohemian guy instead of anything else. Oh yeah, and my half brother has another half brother with whom he shares a mom. And look, my relatives are very weird. Okay, in this area, they're all my family, and like not even gonna bother there. But Dad told me that at one point. Because I didn't believe when he told me this stuff. But I had to verify this with my grandma and with other people. The problem was that while Dad was in working in this in the youth theater where they played like musicals and such for kids. Over there, my grandparents. I think I'll make an episode about them as well because I really need to find out about my grandpa on that side. Yeah, well. My grandma was like, if you're heard something from Latvia, there's a doctor called Paul Stradiņš who was like the father of Soviet medicine and all this stuff, and she managed to be one of his direct apprentices, so to speak. And after that, by the way, she then taught personally our ex-president Valdis Zatlers too. He was a traumatologist. So basically, Paul Stradiņš is also the guy after whom our like best medical university is named, and that's actually good enough that it's like when it comes to medical department, we used to specialize at that, and Grandma was very competent in this. So she was that, and my grandpa just built roads, and I'm really curious because he also managed during the Soviet era to go both to Japan and USA, and that's another story. But basically, they were like really, really hard-working folks. And at one point, they get an award. they were allowed to go to the Black Sea, to Crimea, and around those parts for a month. Because, again, well, they weren't... They were really just competent because they both came from families originally treated as highly, suspicious and not loyal, but they liked hiking, and so they went for a month and left keys with my dad. My dad was, I don't know, he was in college, okay, and working. Dad also had the first time ever when in Soviet era, he was finally able to stay for a prolonged period of time in one of these Khrushchevkas for properly alone. Because grandma, like I said, she was very strict. And she also knew my dad. I don't blame her. She also knew me. She was organized. That's why dad did all his crazy stuff outside of home normally. But then dad decided that, hey, look at all the candy boxes. You see, in the Soviet era, it was like this tradition which also existed for a while that, you said thank you, basically, to your doctor. Like, my grandma specifically said that she didn't take bribes. Neither did my grandpa. They were stupidly honest people with harsh principles. I tried to learn from them. But, people are people. So instead, my grandma had a bunch of candy boxes which she didn't eat because of health reasons. A lot of them. And, of course, well, as she actually worked with and operated on a bunch of party officials and saved their lives, quite a lot of expensive bottles of really expensive booze. And if you remember from my earlier episodes, yeah, good booze is basically... good booze was more expensive than anything regular. And, not like they drank it too much. So my dad decides that, he has a hunch that, grandma doesn't eat the candy. He unpacks the boxes and, of course, there are rubles inside, and quite a lot. Look, if my grandma would have gotten them from the candy boxes, then she probably would, I don't know. She would feel guilty about this stuff. Because, again, she really, she took all this stuff very, very principled. But, they were just in those boxes. Dad then decides to, basically, he collects everything. And if you recall, monthly salary was about 120 rubles for an engineer. For a skilled person. Everyone made about the same amount of money. Dad said that at one point he just kind of stopped counting about all the rubles. It was more than 500 there. So, this is why I had all this stuff when I started recording. Imagine this, for perspective. In today's equivalent of how cool this seemed, he counted that he has, about 25 liters in various bottles and sizes of really, really expensive booze. Of that. Then he has, as he said, about 6 or 7 monthly salaries of a very, very skilled dude. He knows none of this will be pretty much missed because, if he says to grandma that he studied that he drank the booze, she'd be like, she would forgive him. She was that kind of person. And then, as he said, that was a month. For the first week, everything is fine because then he decided that it's time to call the friends. As you see, there is no ordering pizza or anything like that sort. There's also no phone. They had to wait for a phone line. Yes, even they at that point had to wait for a phone line. But imagine this, punk rock guys. This time, by the way, this is the reason why I mentioned Ozzy. He comes in here because he stated that they would for a whole week. They would just wake up everyone and themselves by just blasting something from Black Sabbath turbo loud. They varied the songs. And at one point, when they decided that they have run out of stuff, but basically playing an album of Black Sabbath on maximum loudness was what they did in 6 a.m. Every morning for a week. Then they decided that, they were only halfway done with the booze because... one of the relatives also had decided that, hey, look, Well, he knows where to get some moonshine. So they did. Basically, by the end of week 2, the situation was as follows. He told everyone from like his college, as maps and everything, that you go out and drive with the 18th trolley bus down to the stop, and then just follow where the music is coming from. The neighbors were pissed off. The neighbors stopped being pissed off because, well, turns out Dad hadn't checked all the candy boxes apparently. But at that point, he says it was pretty difficult for him to remember. But he remembers that at one point he had paid off pretty much everyone, because they just gave like instantly. They gave like some booze and literally like 20 rubles straight into the face of everyone who arrived. He just remembered he possibly gave like a whole bottle to the cops. So like by the end of week 3, the neighbors don't complain. They just sometimes arrive and ask for a bit more booze. He said that by that point he remembers extremely hazily and just barely at all, because he remembers vaguely that at one point apparently there have been like possibly border guards in, but he doesn't know. Someone had called a doctor, like an ambulance, but he also barely remembers that. Everyone was playing music all the time. At one point, the conductor of their music academy apparently also had arrived. I by the way have checked this with both my grandma and people involved, those people whom I can find. I can tell you, I'm now lagging here because I haven't been able to find everyone who remembers every period of time. But well, I asked other people whom I can find, and basically by the end, no one also remembers what happened there. But at one point, someone arrived and had brought stuff. But I know that Dad passed out, and then the problem started, because just as Dad passed out, everyone remembered that my grandma, she was a high-ranking medic. She was like one of the top physicians in the country. And at that point, painkillers, and like I said, drugs were taboo. I said that earlier, right? Yeah, guess what? You had to keep your painkillers, as she also worked from these emergency calls and everything, and worked with high-ranking people. Yeah, she had a whole like a locked box with painkillers, opium. Amazing, isn't it? That all was registered, like totally registered and everything. And that was quite a bit crazy. So he, in his great wisdom, said that he told someone that just don't fuck with the logbox, because he thinks there might be something like there. Well, next I'm gonna have to pass that out for a few days, I think, because I don't know, because at that point I have to do some recalling from Grandpa's colleagues and from Grandma, because oh boy, I actually have to check a list here because yeah. So Dad wakes up, and that's a 3-room apartment. There is literally no furniture in the apartment at all. None. Nada. There is a random mattress / rag maybe on the floor in the other like larger room. There is literally no furniture in the apartment at all. And on there's a person whom he doesn't know at all, who apparently, according to Dad's notes, apparently he also just spoke Estonian. Dad didn't speak Estonian. And when he poked him away, he made a call, and then other Estonians picked him up, and left Dad some beers. No, I don't know. I can't verify this one because this is from Dad's notes. Because, wow. But then the damage continued as follows. Look, this was an apartment given, like in this Khrushchevka, by the government. And a lot of medical equipment that was belonging to the state was there. Of course, all the opium was just gone. Everything was just fucking gone. Every piece of furniture. By the way, this is also why I like photos from my childhood. Photographs. Completely, everything is gone. I think that the bathtub was unlocked and there were some wires were missing from the wall. Everything that could be unscrewed from the toilet seat was. They had left two toothbrushes and two toothbrushes and a little kind of postcard. I don't know, it wasn't a postcard. I just know it was a little one. Then Dad moved on to my grandpa's room. Grandpa, at that point, had returned from both the United States and Japan. Grandpa had brought, his own stuff from Japan and everywhere. Yeah. Half of, everything was basically emptied out. A lot of, at that point, people, collected, crystal glasses and all this stuff. That was neatly packed in some sort of a bag and all broken down on the floor, sitting there. The whole room, the room, had a window taken literally out of the frame. Did not exist anymore. And the worst part was, the same thing had happened to the main door of the apartment. So, you have an Estonian guy whom you don't know. Can't verify if Estonian probably maybe spoke something else. Maybe Dad was just panicking and didn't understand him. He gets 2 beers. He's not only missing every piece of furniture, but everything that was basically somewhat left is in a bag, broken down. There is nothing else in the apartment. I think there was some more damage for the walls, but at that point it didn't even matter anymore. He went to the cops himself then and asked, look, dude, what the hell happened? And apparently the cops had arrived again because they heard something suspicious. And apparently the cops were greeted at that point. Because, I don't know exactly, but apparently they were greeted by a KGB guy who said, oh no, it's okay. Well, it's okay. Apparently he had taken most of the opium away because someone had given it to him, but also paid them about 100 rubles to the KGB guy, who said that it's okay that he had weird stuff because grandma was a known doctor, so that the opium would be safe. But the cops arrived. Everything looked pretty much normal. As they said, normal by the standards of that place. Music was still playing. Doors were still in place. And apparently someone who had claimed to be my dad's sister... Yeah, I checked this one with notes and with Dad's buddies and everything. This, by the way, is something that I told Father, and he said that he has no idea. Someone claiming to be Dad's sister, whom we have no idea was. We think it might have been his cousin, but his cousin vehemently denies this, and, his cousin also, really kind of lives on the other side of the country. Basically, someone claiming that just open up the door to the cops, said that, oh yeah, I gave the stuff to KGB to make it safe. And, they had not only paid them off, they had given them another weird bottle of cognac. And thankfully, Dad's base. Inside Dad's base, apparently, they had stuffed in a bit of money, and Dad's passport. They give this to the cops and say, we're just gonna finish party soon. Don't bother, he's gonna find. I handle this. Dad's, by the way, passed out. The cops didn't know where Dad had been passed out. Dad woke up on the floor. He was also naked. He didn't know where his clothes was. Afterwards, I have heard one version of this study because I had to piece it together like a real investigator. I heard that at least one of his shoes was somewhere on the roof. I have seen pictures of the apartment. Oh boy. At that point, Dad thinks he's dead. Because the KGB knows what's going on. My grandma, he thinks his life is over, basically. Oh yeah, there's one little exception. In the kitchen, there's just a huge pile of dirty dishes, in the sink. And I don't know their status, but yeah, it wasn't pretty. Dad goes downstairs, asks for some clothes. He's sent to basically go fuck himself because at least they finally slept for a few days. Dad apparently recognizes that, he apparently has been dragged somewhere or something. We have no idea. I couldn't find anything of that. And, then he realizes that his only choice, he's going to the police anyways. Might as well get arrested or something. As he's going down, apparently there are also some random people who greeted him. Dad is lost and confused. Dad said that he felt very hungover, but also he felt off. I don't know. And off in the sense of, your existence literally goes past your eyes. First of all, because understand the fact that this is a government department. Both cops and the KGB know what's up. And they know that, Dad is in the party stuff, but these guys, they, like I said, they were not from the good and loyal families. They were both with, these disloyal elements who had to work extra hard. He knows that not only his life is over, but, Grandpa's going to lose his job and his, things, and probably going to be, spending at least some time in prison, maybe. Grandma's fucked. Grandma's church might be raided. Our relatives might get arrested. Everything possible that could go wrong in all the possible ways. One thing that I don't recall is that I remember something being written on the walls, but I sadly have lost that one because I exchanged my PCs and I can't find all of these studies. If I know that I have told this story at various times to various people, with various levels of detail coming up, because again, every time I've met a friend of Dad's or something, because this study was very widely known, there always have been some other things, and I have seen photos, I have seen accounts, I have heard memories from unrelated people. So if someone remembers what exactly was on the walls, please tell me. I'm pretty sure that it wasn't anything polite. Well, Dad got to the police station. He wasn't arrested. Instead, he was waved at by also random cars who just opened the window and yelled, "Oh, hey, hi Gundars," or Guncha. At that point, I think he just didn't recognize anyone at all. But, he walks to the cops. Sure, about 20 minutes walk away. And I don't know if people looked at him weirdly, but knowing my dad walking underpants through the street in Soviet era, he afterwards thought that knowing what they've been up to for a month, I think the locals weren't shocked anymore because they had been used to the sight or something. He could not explain it otherwise. When he got to the cops, he was given some clothes. I don't know if it was their clothes, but yeah. Sadly, again, moving and everything, I've lost some details, but I've recreated this as much as I can. Apparently, he was given his contrabass with some of the money. Some of the money was taken, and then he decided that what the hell does he do? He basically thought that all this is just beyond fucked. The cops, thankfully, don't want to arrest him because, for unknown reasons, the cops have no idea what's happened to the apartment because they had been paid off so well. And they had been called so many times that everyone just stopped calling. Because, it's a 7th-floor building. Like the big Khrushchevka, the white ones. I think Brezhnevka maybe even. It's a huge building. There's insanely loud music. Occasionally Black Sabbath at 6 in the morning. Yeah. Dad loved Black Sabbath. Aussie rules. And I don't know what has been done, what has been sold, and what had happened, and how much money they had, or whatever happened. But I spoke to the neighbors, and at that point, they said that, everyone got paid at least like minimum 20 rubles minimum, and those who came again got paid more. But we're saying that, you know what, look, we're gonna deal with this stuff. It's gonna be chill. And there's like 3 apartments per floor, and it's 7 floors, so it's 21 apartments in that one like thing. Apparently, something was given like to people of other apartments as well, but at least some had been like away too. I don't know if they went to every apartment. I didn't check that much, as inhabitants had changed. So by the end, everyone around had either been literally paid off at random and told that everything would be totally fine. Then, apparently, just no one called the cops, except for one occasion, where there was apparently, at one point, the cops did arrive, and there was a single arrest made, apparently. But these were 2 people, according to reports, that were held, who neither of whom Dad knew at all. One of them was stopping the other from taking from carrying out a decorated chair or something. And the other one said that he has to protect Gundars or Gunnars or whatever. Yeah. He did not know my dad's name at that point. This man has never been seen again. I don't know where he is, because apparently he wasn't even from Riga. This is what happens when this whole stuff goes on. After they had been arrested and the cops had finally been done, and there's like also a squabble about who owns what there, with more people. Some of them who were from the kind of music academy, they said that at that point they didn't know anymore. No one knows what happened with the opium at all. Apparently, the lady that had apparently given most of it to the KGB, or so I think, the amount given to the KGB varies. I know the KGB never bothered to ask it back, and like she just went to the hospital and asked, I ran out and I need more. She wasn't asked questions. She was like, because again, I have no idea. This is one of those studies where the fact that I don't know stuff makes it better. Throughout this, remember, there is no windows and no doors. Now, I can understand many things. No one knows about the Estonian guy. Apparently, someone had seen multiple men enter with drinks and possibly some sort of snacks after the doors had been lost, and probably before that. But precise number and things people couldn't remember. There definitely had been sex in the bathtub multiple times, but again, this is something that we don't know. Also, all this mess happened. Apparently, Dad decided that, with all this stuff, he's just happy and confused because the one time they had been paying off everyone, and the one time when they needed the cops, because he said that the last thing that the sleeping Estonian guy sort of remembered, well, his friends, because thankfully they had gone to the bus station and they were interrogated later, and at least they spoke Russian, which Dad remembered or something. When they arrived, they were told that it's fine, the party is about to be over, just make sure that nothing gets stolen. Apparently, they had decided that, oh well, Dad had been sleeping on a couch, and well, they were told that the owner knows stuff. And then at one point, what they remembered was that someone looking like looking like looking like weird, like Caucasus looking, from Georgia or something, had arrived. I don't know what they conversed, but they said like, well, yeah, we thought it was pretty cool, but he just he just decided that he needs to take the chairs away. And I asked them, well, why didn't you stop him, and why didn't you find it suspicious? And they said, well, they already were drunk. Also, at that point, they felt weird because they also kind of didn't even. They were dropped off by a taxi, and they were not supposed to kind of go even there because that was like the wrong address. Because they either lied or missed something because they were incoherent. Possibly the opium, but I don't know. But anyway, this whole stuff happened. Some furniture was taken away. But then evening comes. Then they played cards. One of these guys just stayed. Those two guys, they just went away. And they decided just to go to a random pub or something. This is one of those details that I really don't care about, but apparently they ended up basically being arrested themselves. And couldn't find out why. But then the Estonian guy says, well, I locked the door, made sure that Gundars was breathing. Apparently, people had been checking if he's breathing for a few days. Because, we found out that no, he wasn't like injected with anything. I think this might be like the most amount of alcohol that he'd ever drunk in his life. So he said, apparently he was told, are you okay? Dad said, yeah, sure. Just make sure the base is in the same space. And then the guy realizes there is no like base at the house, and he doesn't know this person. So the guy decided to maybe look around and ask someone of the neighbors where to get the base. Basically, at that point, he wandered around for like a few hours. And again, this is reportedly. When he arrived, a very authoritative looking smiling man just said, oh no, it's okay. We organized this with Gundar. Gundar still sleeps on a couch. Well, some furniture is moved away. No one, like, he didn't ask questions or something. Like, that's a mystery to him. And they say that, we'll just bring it back tomorrow, everything's fine. The doors get locked. The Estonian guy, has a few more drinks. It's just bizarre for everyone. Then again, something was written on the walls, and I missed the clothing because this story, again, people's memories are weird. So I know the things that I've written down from all the stuff, the fact that I've verified in various travels, and what I have from notes. I try not to exaggerate because I cannot say if there was like damaged cars or something around. I can just guarantee this paid stuff. And then, apparently, he says goodnight to Dad. Dad wakes up, goes to the bathroom, says goodnight, comes out of the bathroom, falls down on the floor. Estonian guy falls asleep on the couch, wakes up on a random mattress on the floor. Now they have slept through everything. And the Estonian guy said that he was just so shocked that he forgot Russian, and so did Dad. At that point, by the way, Dad, throughout these few days, he had been periodically, while sleeping, because no one saw him move, he had been periodically losing his clothing. No one knows how or where. But, at one point, then Dad wakes up. I have no idea about the doors. I have no idea. But look, this just shows that in the Soviet Union, someone had needed these doors or windows. The worst part was that there was a single window left in place. Well, the frame was. But someone apparently had decided to smash it. How? No idea. Sink had the pan on it. House is a mess. Literally, furniture is gone, everything is gone. And Dad decided to just quietly move into the opera theater, into the chamber with the guys who smoke stuff. Like with his colleagues who work there with the university. He goes there and he goes to the college and speaks to people. Pieces together the stuff that basically, at one point, like at the end of week 3, even they understood that it's a bit too much. Dad, while saying like goodbye to everyone, had been like super happy and chill and sane. But after that, we only know of him existing, sleeping and sleepwalking and losing clothes. Sometimes, occasionally some people, while they checked up on him, everything seemed fine. Like, apparently, like, even Dad's documents were being shown or something. So after all of this, Dad is like the hero of the college because no one knows anything. And then he decides that that his life is over. The situation is like, but this is not the craziest part of all this stuff. Because some things are really important. See, my grandpa, he wasn't a corrupt person as well. He basically started this asphalt factory in around Jelgava, and then for not being corrupt, he was sent over to Iceput, a small town in the middle of nowhere, where it was common that you would steal material, you would write it down, and then you would just sell it off or do portable things. But in Iceput, my grandpa noted that everyone was super alcoholic and there was like nothing going on there. Grandpa, by the way, never drank anything. He hated booze. But, he decided that something needs to be done. First of all, people were living in the communal apartments. So he looked at the plans of because they were the guys who basically fix roads, fix infrastructure, and like build some houses, like local infrastructure construction. Like they managed roads and everything. They had construction materials and everything. And Grandpa decides that, what the hell? This is miserable, and this needs to change. So apparently he had been, in his time there, he had upgraded the efficiency, doing calculations by hand with like a long slider of like the plan, and figured out that if he does everything properly, and not just properly like originally thought, plus stealing included, if he really optimizes what needs to be done and does the priority stuff first and is efficient and does not allow anyone to steal, well then, he basically built a small kind of I think small 2-story houses around the lake with like 4 apartments each around them. But basically, people stopped living in the communal apartments. He just built them. I think they were still there when I last checked. Furthermore, he decided that, booze is like, he didn't bother with like, beers and such, but at that point, we're talking hard alcohol there. Other districts, by the way, tried to buy off stuff from him. So he just refused, saying that, they threw me away from Jelgava, and this is like officially on the map the shittiest district they can be. What are they going to do? They can't fire me. And that was true. But then Grandpa decides that, we have all sorts of cool things to do. He decides to start a choir. He starts like randomly for like men over 30 with their families and everyone whom like he's optimizing them without stealing, build these buildings. Yeah, he decides to start a choir and everything. Then he decides that, army guys have their own sports games. We can do this too, because again, all the athletes are tied to something. And throughout this, like after a couple of years, like after the houses are built and all this starts, neighboring regions start to notice the fact that, Iceput now manages to be like well built. Bigger houses are built, stuff is upgraded. They always do everything according to plan, and everyone is just, everyone at first is starting to get angry, but, the big party bosses are just looking and saying that, what the hell's going on there? Because these guys, alcohol levels are dropping, and basically everything improved for everyone involved. And, then the tradition started of the fact that we have a road industry, music and sports games. Yes, my grandpa started these too. At one point, he got like our order of merit, like 3-star order too. because of that, when he was like, I think later in his life, when he was about close to 90, maybe slightly younger, at one point I was with him to the inaugural, maybe like 50th or something, these World Games. And over there, we drove with a Stalin's Volga straight from the Motor Museum, because, yeah, well, Dad had connections also with everyone else involved in the Ministry of Transportation there. And, yeah, he also helped write books, and he knew the person who made, like, our road museum in Schlockenbach, which is an interesting manner. So he was really, really loved there. And I think if they have those games right now, by the way, I might as well check on them. But at that point, well, he's been moved, promoted, and by the way, everyone just continued doing these games, and apparently, well, in the Soviet era in Latvia, working in the road industry was like, it wasn't considered shit anymore. It was like one of the prestigious things, because, well, they started doing actively stuff. That's why he's got like these awards. And he's sent to like back to the rig to organize like central stuff and do planning work and everything. But after that, Miriam, basically, only thing she knew that, well, hospital, she asked for more of the opium thing, because, she had another chamber there in the hospital or something. She asked for it, and apparently the hospital just said, why do you need this? We just checked, everything's full there. So Miriam responded that all the opium in full, not just some parts of it, they were full in stock. Basically, it seemed like all the opium, like really opium, had been taken from the house and put there. But we also know that some people in the house had been like using it, because there were like empty syringes out there. I don't know. But Miriam is like pissed off and sad. Vilnius, meanwhile, well, he's also really sad because, they also are, they're not even angry at Dad. Everyone, my family's weird like that. They're just super sad about everything. But then, then in one of those studies, people who worked in the like road industry from these various little state-owned enterprises, from Aisput and Jelgava and from Riga, everyone comes together. Basically, everyone arrived, and they're all our construction people. They spent like a couple of, I don't know, maybe 2 days or maybe 3, like a very short amount of time, less than a week, definitely. They were sent off to basically a hotel, and given more vacation days at random. And when they came back, like everything was just like brand new. Doors were in place, windows were new. Someone had even like gotten expensive furniture out there as well. Heck, even some of the glasses were just up in place. Basically because, because this is one of those studies which really shows that you have to be nice to people. Because of this, yeah. So, in the end, neither the police nor KGB ever found out that what had happened there. So, very happy ending, and that's a cool study, but what about Dad? Yeah, my grandma was a nice lady. But, they wanted Dad back, but they realized that, you can't really leave this like this. Yeah, they basically ignored demonstratively Dad for about a week or so. Yep. So the Dad would have to suffer a bit more. After that, at one point, Miriam just went to the theater where he was sleeping, woke him up. Dad nearly pissed his pants at that point. And Miriam said, "Okay, move back. But you're washing the dishes from now to eternity." And you know what? Every time when I visited my grandparents with my dad, and like up until the very day when my grandma died and everything, and even after that, my fucking dad always was the one washing the dishes. Always. Then again, I don't even know how to call this. At that point, it's become some sort of legendary story. But yeah, this is how weird life tends to be in my family. Which is why, when I'm going to write my own studies from Lodz and everything, don't get scared. This stuff runs in the family. And when I'll get to Miriam and everything, Oh boy. I really don't know why. But yeah. And about that stuff, yeah. Dad carried on listening to Ozzy. Was a pretty shit dad, but a really cool guy to hang out with. And well, this was the most psychopathic story that I know. And yeah. Stay good, people. Happiness is mandatory. And sorry that this is so long and it's a bit rambly over there. But it is what it is. It's 3 hours of content. And, well, at least it was good fun. Other episodes won't be as long because the script got added and everything, and I have planned things out. But one thing's for sure. Well, if you know, if anyone basically dares to claim as a journalist that they know what Gonzo is, yeah, you can tell him to fuck off. I still have a couple of things to do, but I have a couple of books to write. My whole Gonzo stories from Ludza being one of them, because I want to publish this indefinitely as a book format. That's the part one of all the Ukraine studies as well. But the Ludza studies will be only in English, because yeah, I'm not ready yet to do that in Latvian. So thank you, and put on something from Ozzy. Look, we're nowhere near as legendary, but hey, I do sort of feel that, you know, if everything is good and fair in the afterlife, then when Ozzy meets my dad, you know, with all of this, well, Dad avoided drugs as far as he knew, but I think that they might have a good time together. Happiness is mandatory. And stay safe. Stay safe and believe in yourself.